and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and welcome to our regular scheduled meeting of February 16th. We have people trying to come in and sit down. Is there still room on this side, I think? You might. I don't want to do like the theater and tell everybody move to the wall. There's some up this side. You're encouraged to come in, find a seat, and join us. Please note the council's in full attendance tonight. I also want to welcome the members of our Citizens Academy. I was trying to find, since we're so crowded, I can't see you all. They're back. Okay. Well, do I dare ask you just to stand up real quick? Will all the members of the Citizens Academy? There they are. Okay. I recognize some faces there. Thank you for being here. You picked a good meeting to come to. That's a good thing. Okay, items from council is first, and I have a couple of things I'd like to do, council, if you'll indulge me. I know you're probably aware, of course, tonight, there's a lot of people here regarding the potential food truck ordinance, for lack of a better term to call it that. It's about more than that, though. I became aware they had a meeting yesterday evening, and they were very gracious and let me attend, and I talked to them about the ordinance, and that group is a fairly newly formed group of food truck vendors. So they have obviously a vested interest in this, and they only got the ordinance at the same time we did last week, Thursday, Friday, and they would like more time to digest this and perhaps work with staff. So what I wanted to ask council is if you would be willing to entertain a motion to postpone C1 and C2 for maybe, I don't know, however long it might take, 60 days, 45 days. I don't want it to go on forever, but I would like to ask our city attorney to meet with them, schedule a couple of meetings. I think they've picked some representatives from their group. And then also I'd like to ask if the council members are interested in attending those meetings. One or two of you, I know Mr. Halapaska has a lot of experience in food industry. Mr. Alvarez made time to attend the meeting. I don't know if he's interested.
I'm willing.
Anyone want to volunteer?
Ms. Scott wants to attend, that's fine.
Okay. So we still need to vote to postpone these two items. Would someone be willing to make a motion?
I so move. Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to postpone these. Mr. Alvarez?
Questions about doing this. I'd hope that we would go ahead and put it on the floor to have a public hearing to allow everyone that's here that wants to speak to it. Or the other option would be to allow them to speak in citizens' communication, maybe, if we decide to table it.
Oh,
Postpone it, I'm sorry.
They can certainly.
Well, any person can speak on any issue, whether it's on the agenda or not, under the citizens' communication. That would not bar them from doing so. But in light of the fact that they got this at such a late date, perhaps we should be able to sit down and work through these first and then come back. Otherwise, I think we're going to be all over the place.
Well, I agree with you, Councilman, and would encourage, if we do postpone these two items, we will not be putting them on the floor, therefore not subject to public hearing. Therefore, I would encourage those that have come here to speak to that, use item B2 under citizens communication. I'd like to hear their input tonight, starting tonight, going forward, to open up the discussion as to what are some of the key, if not all the issues that concern them.
It's certainly their choice. I mean, they're welcome to speak to it as much as they like. I have no problem with that. We won't be debating it amongst this group, though, if we postpone this. So, but again, if so, Mr. Halapaska, you'd
Be happy to help out.
Ms. Scott, you would be willing? So perhaps they could be part of these meetings and flesh it all out. So, very good.
We have a second, I think we need to vote.
Right, I know, I'm almost through. But I do want to apologize. You know, I wish that I had done this earlier. I told the group last night I should have reached out to them earlier to get a meeting done before it got to this point. But that's okay. We can still take care of all this. So, are there any comments on this particular motion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay, so it is effectively postponed. And again, you guys are welcome to speak here in a few minutes about it. Okay, also I would like to ask council to move item E3 and consider it at the same time we consider C3. Those two are both related. Do y'all mind doing C3 first, then following it with E3?
The other way around, E3 first.
Oh,
I was going
E3.
to say, the way I read it, E3
Yeah,
sounded
let's
better
do E3
first, and then,
I
yeah.
actually have first written next to it on my notes here. So. Okay, so we'll do that. We'll do E3 before we do C3. Okay, which is relating to the recycling issue. Okay, so the other item, of course, is the panhandling issue, but is there anything, council, y'all would like to bring up before we start on that one? That's just a report. Okay. So what we'll do for everyone who's fairly new here is our city attorney is going to, I don't know how much of a background I want to go into on the panhandling issue. It's just that I have received a lot of communication in recent months about it and asked staff at our last meeting to offer suggestions. Since there's a lot of citizens' concerns and several citizens have taken it upon themselves to do their own investigative work and draw some of their own conclusions and share those with me. And so when I asked staff to offer any suggestion, it wasn't just an ordinance necessarily. It could have been something from the police department or anybody. And so that's what we're going to discuss now. There is no action to be taken tonight. There is no vote on any rules or ordinances regarding panhandling. It's just a discussion. So with that, Mr. Gush,
Thank
it's all
you,
yours.
Mayor and members of council. Tonight, my report is in two parts. The first, I want to analyze the legality of various panhandling ordinances in light of recent Supreme Court cases. And then I want to get into a survey of what some of our area cities are doing in order to try to regulate panhandling within their communities. I'm going to start with something very basic.
Yeah, Thomas.
sorry.
There's seats up here.
Don't be shy.
Staff, raise your hand if you've got seats next to you. So, thank you.
Sorry for the interruption.
No, that's
Thomas.
all right.
Or some of the staff come up and sit with your fellow staff people, and maybe that'll free some people up, chairs up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kobe.
All right. I want to start with something basic. It probably goes without saying, but I'm going to start there anyway. The phrase, "Hey, buddy, can you spare a dime?" is speech, right? So is this when I hold it up, even if I don't read it out loud, right? Anytime that the government seeks to regulate speech, you're getting into the area of First Amendment protection of freedom of speech. And so we have to be very, very careful treading in those areas. The most recent time that the Supreme Court has addressed speech was last summer. The U.S. Supreme Court, in the case of Reed versus the town of Gilbert, Arizona, said this. And by the way, each of you has a handout in front of you with the two-page printouts. It's a little bit easier to read than trying to read it off the screen. The Supreme Court said that content-based laws, those that target speech based on its communicative content, are presumptively unconstitutional and may be justified only if the government proves that they are narrowly tailored to serve a compelling state interest. Most of that is not new. Most of that is existing through the case law going back years. The idea that when the government regulates speech based on the content of that speech, it's presumed unconstitutional unless the government can pass a very strict, very high bar test that we call strict scrutiny. And it's that last clause at the end. The government proves that they are narrowly tailored regulations designed to serve a compelling state interest. That test is such a difficult test that every first-year con law student learns that if strict scrutiny applies, the government loses. The governmental regulation will be struck down in almost every single case. In fact, I can't think of one. I've been trying to think of one off the top of my head for the last week, an example where strict scrutiny applied and the regulation was still upheld. So what the Supreme Court was saying last summer was, if you regulate based on the content of the speech, the regulation is going to be struck down, essentially. The part of the case that was new was the clarity describing when it is or is not content-based regulation. The takeaway from the case was, if you have to read the sign in order to determine whether or not the speech is regulated, then your regulation is based on the content of the speech.
Show everybody your sign. Just
I'm sorry, that's my sign. It says, "We'll work for food." If this sign that says, "Have a nice day," is not regulated, but this one that says, "We'll work for food," is regulated, you have created a content-based regulation that is subject to strict scrutiny and will almost always be struck down as unconstitutional. That's the starting point for the analysis of any panhandling ordinance. Because if you start off by regulating the phrase, "Hey buddy, can you spare a dime," but not the phrase, "Have a nice day," then it's content-based speech regulation. Since last summer, since the Reed case, there have been 5 federal cases that have examined panhandling ordinances specifically in relation to the Reed case. Those cases come out of the First Circuit out of Maine, the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals out of Illinois, a district court out of Colorado, and 2 district courts out of Massachusetts, each of which examined municipal panhandling ordinances, and each one struck down the ordinance after examining it in light of Reed. Let me talk about one of those right quick, just to illustrate how far the courts will go to reach and invalidate a panhandling ordinance. The first one on that list, Cutting versus the City of Portland, Maine. Portland passed an ordinance that said you can't spend any more time in the median than it takes to cross the street. Didn't actually mention panhandling in their ordinance anywhere. Nevertheless, the ACLU found 3 panhandlers and put them up as plaintiffs to sue the city and challenge the ordinance. And the plaintiffs said, "We can't speak in the median. Our speech is being prevented." And the city, of course, said, "This isn't a speech ordinance at all. This is a public safety ordinance. Our compelling governmental interest is public safety." You know what the court said? Your ordinance is a pretext for speech discrimination or speech prevention. What you're really doing is preventing someone from standing in the median in order to speak, in order to panhandle. And the court struck down the ordinance, even though the city didn't address panhandling specifically in the text of the ordinance at all. Okay? So the courts are very serious about protecting First Amendment free speech rights when local governments get into the business of trying to regulate speech on a content-based basis. I want to drive a little bit deeper into those 5 cases. I want to talk about the concepts that were described in those municipal ordinances. I've got 7 different concepts described here. When you look at the kinds of content, the kinds of conduct that was being regulated, these are the things that were addressed in those ordinances. For example, we've already talked about traffic islands, roadways. You can't panhandle within a roadway or on a traffic island. One ordinance said you were not allowed to panhandle within the downtown area, a geographic area. That was struck down. 2 ordinances said, this is one ordinance that said a half hour after sunset until a half hour before sunrise. That was also struck down, time-based restrictions. Number 4 is one that's very interesting because I see that in a lot of ordinances. Protection zones around vulnerable areas, 20 feet from an ATM. The regulation said you can't panhandle within 20 feet of an automated teller machine because people are vulnerable at that location. They have cash in their hand. That was struck down. You can't panhandle near parking or transit facilities or outdoor dining facilities. Those were also struck down. And the last one, number 7, may be the most interesting, because if you read the literature on this subject, aggressive panhandling is sort of the modern trend in regulating panhandling. That is, we're not going to regulate all forms of speech, just aggressive speech. We're only going to regulate those instances where somebody is being more than just politely asking for money. There's something aggressive about their conduct. And so I've broken out 5 different subcategories there where someone is panhandling in an intimidating manner. They are physically touching a person. They are using fighting words. They're making repeated requests after the solicitee says no or please stop bothering me. Or they are following the person asking for money. All 5 of those have been struck down. This is just in the last 9 months. This is just the cases interpreting Reed versus City of Gilbert. Courts are being very consistent in saying that panhandling restrictions are not constitutional. They are not valid. Okay? Now, I'm going to pause before I move on to the second half of my presentation where I'm talking about what other cities are doing in order to give you an opportunity to ask questions about the underlying law. But I expect that you're going to have one question first right off the bat. Let me get this one out of the way. One of the questions is likely to be, how are we talking about what other cities are doing if it's unconstitutional, right? Okay. There's a presumption of validity when a legislative body like a city council adopts an ordinance. We presume that it is a valid law until it gets struck down by the court. That's another way of saying we don't allow the citizens to choose which ordinances they think are valid and which ones they have to follow. The city is entitled to enforce each of its properly adopted ordinances until such time as a court strikes it down. Okay? So the ordinances that I'm going to go over in the second half of my presentation, each of them may have problems, but you're not going to hear me say that they are illegal because they are presumed valid. What I will say is they may not withstand judicial scrutiny. If a court looks at it, the court may strike it down. Okay? But with that, let me open it up to any questions we have. We're kind of at the halfway point.
Thomas, on these 5 cases cited,
Yes, sir.
is it safe to assume that those cities incurred a cost? Or
Yes,
did they
it
just
is.
say, no, we'll stop and throw the ordinance out and walk off?
It's a great practical question. What happens if the city gets sued? You're talking about a civil lawsuit, in which case the city is going to have to defend itself and incur its own attorney's fees. Then if the plaintiffs win, the city will also have to pay the plaintiff's attorney's fees, and there will likely be some monetary award given to the plaintiffs for the city having violated their civil rights. So yes, you're talking about a monetary penalty.
So, there's been a lot of discussion about what Corpus Christi did, and they only chose to address aggressive panhandling as opposed to passive, which is, I think, more of what we have here. It's just a matter of time if someone down there decides to phone the ACLU and they have the resources and decide, let's go down to Corpus, show up, and in your opinion, pursue it, and then Corpus would have to rescind that and incur any related cost. Houston has an ordinance, correct?
Houston has
San
an
Antonio has an ordinance.
That's right.
So those large metropolises, that has not occurred to our knowledge. I understand through my reading that they don't like to approach those guys because they have deep pockets and a lot of depth on their legal team, whereas we have 2 people.
Yes, sir.
Does that make a difference? Are
I
we
think
more
it
likely
does.
at risk?
I don't know whether we are more
I
at
mean-
risk or not, but I will tell you, I talked with the city attorney in Corpus Christi, Miles Risley. Some of you know him. He used to be an assistant city attorney and then city attorney here. And part of their analysis is exactly what you're talking about, the fact that they do have a large in-house legal team. I think it's about 20 attorneys, and they're able to defend those cases in-house, and it costs them less money to do that.
Well, but I would think it's more about who the ACLU or whoever chooses to target for whatever reason. I don't know the logic behind it. I don't know why, obviously it was in Portland, it was up to those individuals that chose to call them and, okay.
That's right.
All right. That's all.
Any other questions? Okay, let me
I have
move on.
one.
And
I have one.
yes, ma'am.
If there is cost involved and that could, involve more cost to the city, why are we even thinking about passing some kind of ordinance?
Well, I wouldn't say that we are thinking about passing an ordinance. I have not been asked to draft an ordinance. I was asked to give a report about whether or not it would be legal to draft an ordinance if we were considering it down the road.
Fact-finding.
Yeah. I think this is an important preliminary step to ask,
and just-
even if we wanted to, could we?
I mean, let's be clear. I asked for this because of numerous contacts I've had. that's why we're here we are now, so, okay.
All right. In the second part of my presentation, I'm going to talk about 4 different cities. I examined only 4 different cities, the 4 major cities surrounding Victoria: Houston, San Antonio, Austin, and Corpus Christi. I found that each of the 4 of them had an ordinance prohibiting panhandling in some form or another. And the spreadsheet, I'm sorry, when you put it on the PowerPoint, gets very small, and I apologize to everyone in the audience, they probably can't read it. For council members, I've handed each of you a larger version of the spreadsheet so that you can read it a little bit better. It looks like this. What you're looking at here is, the spreadsheet is in 2 parts, and this is just the first part of it, what I'm calling vulnerable locations. Down the left-hand side, you see in blue various different locations where panhandling is regulated by some of the cities. And then under each city's column, you have, in many cases, like under Houston, you see that 8-foot margin. What that means is at the ATMs, there's an 8-foot buffer zone within Houston. You're not allowed to panhandle within 8 feet of the ATM. In San Antonio, that buffer is 50 feet. In Austin and Corpus Christi, it's 25 feet, okay? In the columns where you see an X, that's an outright ban. In Austin, for example, thou shalt not panhandle at a transit facility. I think that was bus stops specifically in Austin, and parking garages as well, maybe. And so that is just an outright ban. And then where there are some other qualifying language, I tried to summarize it in text there. So if you go down the list of things that are included in some of the ordinances around Texas, you're seeing prohibitions around ATMs, around the entrances of banks or financial institutions, around check cashing businesses and pay telephones, all of those kind of financial transactions. Again, like I said earlier, I think the concept is those people are vulnerable at that location because they may be carrying money with them. The next group of them is transit-type facilities, parking meters, parking fee collection boxes, parking garages, and general transit facilities like bus stops. And those are also regulated typically with setbacks of some sort. Then you get into crosswalks. We've talked about medians that are similar to the crosswalk regulation. You'll notice that in San Antonio, the regulation is 50 feet from a crosswalk. If you back up from the crosswalk, that's about 3 cars worth of stacking distance before that intersection. Within Austin, though, there's no foot setback. It just says at a crosswalk. So I assume that means just directly at the location. Outdoor dining establishments, fuel dispensing devices in Houston, school entrances in Austin, the downtown business district in both Austin and Corpus Christi, on private property in Corpus. Let me circle back to that one in a second. And then the last one there is North Beach. That's another geographic area in Corpus Christi. But on private property, that's an interesting prohibition. I think there's already state law saying that you can't panhandle on my private property without my permission, right? It's called trespassing. If you come onto my property and do anything I don't want you to do, I call the cops, they give you a criminal trespass warning and tell you not to come back. You do it again, I call the cops, they haul you off, right? And so I'm not sure that we need a content-based regulation of free speech to protect the interest of the private property holder. And so areas like that, I think, are very, very challengeable if somebody wanted to challenge that ordinance. All right? Now, take this same chart and let's cross off all of the items that have already been reviewed by federal courts in the last 9 months.
Thomas, real quick, do you know when each of these cities passed their ordinance?
I don't know the dates of the first 3. I know Corpus Christi amended their ordinance just this January.
I think it's 2010 is when they passed it, I think.
They may have originally passed it in 2010. They just added a bunch of this here in January of 2016.
I'm curious why Corpus would add in the private property prohibition when that's already the right of a property owner.
It's a good question. I don't know the answer to that question. Right?
Curious.
Okay, so crossing off the ones that have already been outlawed by the, ruled unconstitutional by the court, that doesn't leave much on the list, okay? And this is just comparing this table back to the list that I shared earlier. So let's talk about the second half of that spreadsheet, which is the aggressive panhandling. And again, we don't have setbacks in this section except for Houston, which has an 8-foot setback. Everything else is just a prohibition on this type of conduct, whether that is approaching the solicitee in an intimidating manner, whether that is using obscene language. I like that one. By the way, I went and looked to see if they had a list of the obscene words that you're not allowed to use. That's just the kind of guy I am. Touching the solicitee. By the way, that's also called assault if you touch the person in the course of that without their permission. So we also have a penal ordinance attached to that. Blocking their safe passage, following the solicitee if you're doing that in an intimidating manner. And then the one that is most common, it's in all 4 ordinances, asking a second time after I say no. All right, if I tell you don't ask me again, or if I say no, I'm not going to give you any money, or if I say leave me alone or go away, then it becomes a crime. All right? Again, let's do the same thing. Cross off the ones that the federal courts have already ruled are unconstitutional, and that takes away a lot of the options. Okay? If you're looking at that list, that spreadsheet of what other cities are doing as sort of a menu that you want to choose from to try to craft an ordinance for the city of Victoria, that's what's left. Those are the only things that are left that have not already been addressed by the federal courts, have not already been ruled unconstitutional. It's not much. It's fuel pumps, the entrance of school, private property, obscene language. By the way, I didn't tell you the reason I went looking for the words that are obscene is because if you tell me a specific word I cannot use, that's sort of the essence of content-based regulation, isn't it? I can't include that word on my sign, then it is, by definition, content-based. That is not going to survive strict scrutiny. And then the last one on the list, I'm sorry, is blocking safe passage. Those 5 are the only ones that have not been struck down by the courts. And in my opinion, the only reason they have not yet been struck down, they haven't been included in ordinances that have been challenged. Mayor and Council, I think there are 2 questions for you to consider if you are considering adopting a panhandling ordinance. The first question is, do you think that any of this that's left would survive judicial scrutiny? I'll tell you my answer is I don't think so. When you start from the premise that it is content-based speech and you have a very high hurdle to overcome, I don't think you can get there in those categories. There may be other avenues available that have not been considered by some of these cities, but I don't see it on this list. The second question I think you need to consider, and this is one I can't answer for you, is whether you think that ordinance would solve the problem. Mayor and Council, I'll take any questions you have at this point.
I have a few.
Sure.
What would distinguish when the fire department goes out and raises funds for MDA on those same streets over a period of time?
Yes, sir. The MDA Fill the Boot campaign was very successful, wasn't it? I appreciate the fire chief bringing this down to me this evening so I would have something to show you. I like visual aids. You can tell by my signs. This is the law that was passed back in 2005 that says as long as they meet certain legal requirements like having insurance and all of the people doing that being city employees, as long as they meet those requirements, they are allowed to do that. That's state law. Okay.
And then distinguish someone that would be selling roses like we've seen in other cities or selling the newspaper in other cities.
Right. I'm sorry, what's the question?
Distinguish that, their ability to do that. Do they get a permit? Do they have some type of, similar to what we're discussing?
There are some old federal cases that suggest that there is a difference between commercial speech and panhandling. And in some of those cases, panhandling is found to be commercial speech, which is more easily regulated, like a billboard ordinance. But I think the most recent opinion from the Supreme Court this last summer clears that up and says it is content-based regulation if you have to read the sign in order to tell what's being regulated. So I don't think those old cases are good law anymore.
One final question. We do have we have Texas Department of Transportation code that stipulates certain no-nos for people stepping off the street. Could you explain that?
That's correct. Within the transportation code, and I forget the code section number, otherwise I'd bore you with that too. The transportation code makes it illegal for a person to step off the curbs, medians, and sidewalks out into the roadway for purposes like this. I know that the chief of police has been sharing some information, I think that was in the newspaper article, about those sections of the code saying that they can't step out into the street. That doesn't prevent someone from panhandling on the sidewalk. It is an open question about whether that person is violating the law if they step off the curb in order to collect money from a car window. I think they probably are violating state law at that point.
Who enforces that?
That would be the police department or the
Police
sheriff's
or
department
any law enforcement can enforce that? Including the DPS, since it's
That's
state law?
correct. I said text dot, I meant DPS. Thank you for correcting me.
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
What would your opinion be of having them apply for a permit to panhandle?
All right. Permits are a different type of regulation. They're not a prohibition, right? But it's still a form of regulation where we're regulating it. And so we have to still start with that preliminary question, is our regulation content-based? And if it's only panhandlers or only panhandlers and solicitors that have to register, then it is content-based. Let me tell you a story. I told the mayor this story this morning. There's a woman that I know who stood at this podium and addressed council one time previously, and I'm sorry I don't remember her name, but I see her around town at bus stops. And she usually has her headphones in. She's usually singing along with the music, and she's full of life and is often dancing on the sidewalk at a bus stop. Federal courts have said dancing is a form of speech as well. If you're regulating this kind of speech, panhandling, but you're not regulating her dancing, then it's content-based, isn't it? So the only way to keep it away from being content-based and being struck down under strict scrutiny is to ask her to register to dance at the bus stop.
You gotta love lawyers, right?
Now,
Sorry, Jim.
okay, so is parading a form of free speech?
What do you mean by parading?
Like holding a parade?
Yes, it's expressive conduct,
Do
yes.
we not have parade permits?
Yes, we do have parade permits. The reason we have parade permits is because at that point we're not, okay, there hasn't yet been a Supreme Court that says a parade permit is content-based speech regulation. There's no doubt that it is speech regulation. But because it's not content-based, it falls under a lower standard known as intermediate scrutiny, which we can pass as long as we have a strong governmental interest and we are narrowly tailored to meet that. In other words, protecting the public by not closing down streets to have parades unless you have a permit and we have sawhorses blocking intersections and stuff, that public safety concern is strong enough to allow us to regulate a parade.
But we don't regulate the type of parade.
No, we don't. That's a very important distinction. Thank you. If we said that the livestock show is allowed to have a parade, but the veterans are not, oh, then we'd be in trouble. Then we would be content-based, we'd fall under strict scrutiny, and that would be struck down.
If I can add to the conversation I had with an attorney, I was grasping at straws, but for example, requiring them to wear a safety vest. Okay, and then the firemen collecting for MDA, they'd be required to wear a safety vest. That kind of breaks that cycle of, it's an emotional thing when people drive up and they're uncomfortable with these people, and it elicits an anger and, why we're here today. But I think, because what's the problem? The problem is people give them money. That's the problem. So if they're wearing a red vest, it takes away a little bit from that. I think they'd be less likely to receive money. So can we do that? Well, hence the lady at the bus stop. We can't make her wear a red vest. That's not practical.
Unless you're going to make the dancers wear a red vest, too.
So the next step was between the back of this curb and the back of this curb, which
Right.
would encompass all those islands out there that are in the middle, those traffic islands.
And we really are replaying a conversation we had earlier now.
Yeah.
The answer to that question is isn't that really just a pretext for regulating the panhandling? Remember the case in Portland, Maine, where they said you're not allowed to stand any longer than it takes to cross the road? The court said, come on, that's really just a pretext for regulating panhandling. They saw right through the pretext, and they went ahead and shot the ordinance down anyway. And I'm concerned that if we did adopt an ordinance similar to what you're describing, we'd have the same problem that Portland, Maine had. Yes, sir.
The right of free speech, we all recognize that. But we also recognize that panhandling isn't really helping the poor. What if we encourage our citizens, instead of giving money to panhandlers, to please donate to the local homeless shelter and other charities that do deal with this? Could we put up signs or just try to inform people that they should try to do that if they feel charitable?
That's a very good question. It's a very good question.
Well, we're not
There
gonna
hold up
say-
sign
You
says,
have to abide by the
"Don't help
sign
the
ordinance."
panhandlers." I didn't mean to throw you a curve.
No, it's a great curve. I don't mind curveballs. It's a great question. When you say encourage them to give money elsewhere, I was concerned about what you meant by encourage. You know, if we were to pass a regulation that said thou shalt not give money to panhandlers,
No.
that's going to be struck down immediately, okay? But simply an informational campaign that you're describing, I'd have to analyze that further.
Just that if we could encourage people, instead of giving money to panhandlers, to give to a local charity that does deal with the real issues.
Right.
Those are two different issues, I got to point out, and maybe that might be a way to address it more effectively.
Of course, we're doing that now, aren't we?
Yes, we
Raising
are.
awareness.
But trying to raise awareness that this has little or nothing to do with our local homeless population or helping anyone. It's just helping a single individual who won't accept a check.
Ms. Scott, you had some, go ahead.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm really struggling with, I mean, it sounds like you're telling us that we should do nothing and just be sitting ducks, and I'm uncomfortable with that. I mean, to me, this is an occupation that these individuals have chosen. And there are lots of occupations that require licenses, require permits. You know, this is also, I can't speak for any of them, but I suspect that at least one of them probably isn't reporting this income on their taxes. It just seems like there are other angles. I do agree that encouraging everybody to not give to these people and to give to an organization is a really important message to get out there. The only other thought I have is you're talking about repeat requests. Well, if I drive through an intersection 2 or 3 times, I've now had repeat requests.
That's a great point.
If I could add to that, you know, the police department is warning people about an IRS scam over the telephone. Well, is this a scam too, perpetrated by a few people? How is it different? It's not on the phone, it's just face to face. I thought about that, and it's like, I don't know how that's handled. That may be, you know,
The
police
question,
department.
is it a scam, is a very interesting fact-based question. I know, I am aware of some comments that were posted to Facebook about the origin of some of the people who are panhandling in our city. I don't know whether that qualifies as a scam or not. If I'm standing...
Oh, yeah, no. Social media doesn't mean a thing. It could, yeah.
Well, I know, but what I'm saying is if I'm standing on the street asking for money, and I'm holding out my hand and asking for money, where's the fraud in that? The fact that I don't live in the community?
False pretenses, but I also understand that our police department doesn't necessarily have the resources or time to chase people down who are going to disappear and vanish in no time anyway. And, you know, if they don't have a home address to even, you know, you write them a ticket and it's the end of that ticket. It's never going to be seen again. So I understand that. I'm just thinking out loud.
Frustrating.
This is an extremely difficult thing to address. You know, I also just happen to believe that it's not brand new for Victoria. It's just it's a small group of people that are very visible in a very visible location that have caused all this attention. It might be 5 or 6 people causing the problem, and that's it. So,
And that's what I need to point out. They're not from here. They came from somewhere. Why did they come from somewhere to here? Because the greener pasture was here. And they left the pasture they were in because it had been overgrazed.
Well, obviously, they were encouraged to come here by someone. But I'm reminded a couple of things. You know, during election time, I see some of us out on the streets panhandling for votes. So, you know, sometimes we have to be careful about who we're calling panhandlers.
We don't stay for very long in any one place.
It still may be correct.
Now, yeah, exactly.
Been called a lot of things, but no.
And the other thing is, okay, you apply these legal tests, sexually oriented businesses, and its relationship with speech,
Yes, sir.
and how some communities have been able to regulate that to the point where they've created free zones, or you can only have them in this area versus you can't have them near a school, et cetera. Same thing with nightclubs or where they sell alcohol. You have to be so many feet from a school, a church, et cetera. You know, does any of those type of laws that have been written apply, or those standards, how the way they've constructed that, meet these tests?
The standards in those cases are similar but not identical to the standards that would be applied in a panhandling case. That is to say, I referred to dance being speech. It's those cases that establish that dance is speech. So certainly it is a protected form of speech, and there are limitations on the regulation that government can impose upon that. Outright bans of that kind of conduct are not allowed. There are, because, remember, the standard is a compelling governmental interest. We have to have a compelling governmental interest, and then we have to narrowly tailor our regulation to only impact that compelling governmental interest. The protection of young, vulnerable members of society from being exposed to that kind of conduct is seen as a higher governmental need. The compelling governmental interest is more significant in that case than it is in protecting people from panhandling.
Or getting hit by a car?
When you're talking about individuals, I suspect you may be right.
Any more questions? Okay. Thank you, Thomas.
Sure.
So regarding this item, if I'm willing to bet that I think it's very important that we hear from the public. So here in just a second, everybody can have a chance to get up and talk about that. I don't see any willingness on anyone on council to ask Thomas to come back with an ordinance, but that can happen at another time. We may have a whole set of speakers here that compel one of us to do that. I just want to clear that up. We're still in items from council. Is there anything before I close that? Okay. Seeing none, so what we're going to do is move into citizens' communication. And if you notice, there's a clock up there. We're not limiting free speech, I hope. We do that so that everyone has a courtesy to everyone else. So please limit your comments to 5 minutes and one time per person. So when you come up, and whether it's food truck or whatever you want to talk about, state your name and address for the record, and then try to limit your comments to 5 minutes. And if you have questions of staff, this is the time. So whoever wants to come on up, citizens' communication is now open. And if you have a handout, give it to the officer. He'll give it to us.
Mayor, members of council, my name is Chris Compton. I live at 702 Ashland Creek. I'm here to speak out against the creation of an ordinance banning or regulating solicitation by pedestrians, often referred to as panhandling. There are some folks that are here tonight to voice their concerns over safety. Others are here to tell you about these panhandlers' pasts, that some aren't from Victoria, and that they're stealing our money because they're deceitful about their plight. These are all valid concerns, but I don't think they absolve us from personal responsibility, self-governance, and enforcing our existing laws. One of my discussions on this issue, someone asked me, where in the Bill of Rights does it say we're allowed to panhandle? My answer was that the Bill of Rights doesn't give us any rights at all. It lists the rights that our government is expressly forbidden to take from us. And to guard against that kind of interpretation, the Ninth Amendment was included. I'd like to draw your attention to a related opinion issued by the Texas Attorney General in 1995, where I believe two key points are outlined. The first point is that the First Amendment's free speech guarantee protects solicitation of funds. Even begging or panhandling warrants First Amendment protection. The second key point is that the Attorney General applied a two-part test for the validity to the contribution solicitation portion of Section 552007A of the Transportation Code, finding it invalid under the First and 14th Amendments because it established a content speech restriction. On the issue of safety, a Facebook page created about this issue has served as a rally point for people to express their concerns. There have been many pictures taken with cell phones to justify these claims. However, I haven't seen any comments about contacting the police to address the safety concerns and enforce our existing laws. In that regard, I'd like to draw your attention to a 2012 case involving an association of League City day laborers and their successful suit against the city of League City, which addresses the second test of the Attorney General's opinion, which is to serve a legitimate public interest. The judge in that case found that the city provided no credible evidence that the day laborers' solicitation ever caused any traffic accidents, and that they did not show why other traffic laws, which did not target free speech, were inadequate to serve the public's legitimate interest in traffic safety and control. On the question of whether these panhandlers are legitimately needy or panhandling has become their career of choice, I feel it has no bearing in justifying an ordinance. We should not attempt to force a moral standard by creating laws. For these reasons, I ask that you avoid a rush to action in the face of popular opinion and remain steadfast in the protection of our liberty. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Compton. Anyone else who'd like to come up? Don't be shy.
My name is Richard Rivera. I live at 378 King Drive. For the last year, my family, we've been helping some of these homeless here and some of the panhandlers try to get their lives together. Now, the reason that some of these can't get their lives together is, A, they have no IDs. They have no addresses to get anything mailed to. There's a gentleman here I've been helping for a year. We've been trying to get his IDs. We can't get his IDs. They keep telling us, no, 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 no. They won't help us. He was released from prison, and they keep telling us it's not their problem. He's a ward of the state, and they won't do nothing for him. But then again, he's against his parole. He can't come up with no money. He has no ID. We've been to the city office here, or whatever they call it. They won't help him. We sent the papers away to get his birth certificate. Not only do they not send our money back, but they told us they can't help us. So I think there's other problems we need to address, maybe try to help some of the homeless, and let the public will push away the people that are homeless. It's been happening. If you notice, they've been pushed off the streets. The ones that have been there are our homeless that need help. You know. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, good evening. My name is Robert Constantine. I reside at 624 Pennsylvania Avenue, Victoria, Texas. I am here to talk about the panhandling problem that we do have in this city. I've heard it from many people about females feeling uncomfortable at traffic lights, on Navarro especially, about the panhandlers there. We do have a problem with out-of-town people coming into Victoria and going ahead and panhandling, okay? The things that I'm concerned about was what Thomas had said was, I don't want to violate anybody's civil rights, okay? But you got people down here that's going ahead and they're making a professional career out of being a panhandler. So why don't we go ahead and sell them a city permit, okay? Charge them $100. But then go ahead and make them have proof of liability insurance to the amount of $1 million. Okay, every other business in this town that pulls a city permit from the city of Victoria has basically $1 million liability insurance, if I'm not mistaken. So go ahead and make these people come up with a liability insurance. That way, the panhandler, if he gets hit on the roadway, it covers him, okay? If he steps out and steps in front of a car, it covers the car. You know, if there's one way to get around the law, is go the other way, okay? City of San Antonio has went ahead and started fining people for giving panhandlers money. This may be an option as well, okay? That is inside the city ordinance of San Antonio. The biggest thing, the fine thing I find out about it is it impedes traffic, okay? These people are stepping off of the curb, going out to the street. You're having to wait there at a stoplight, waiting for them to get their money so you can go ahead and continue your travel. That's happened to all of us, okay? That's about what I have to say, except I heard a comment earlier saying there was no way to enforce these laws, okay, and to enforce a panhandling. Why don't we get a code enforcement officer, okay? Code enforcement officers can be used for many things, okay? Not just tall grass, not just houses that are bad and condemned. Code enforcement officers can do a lot of regulating. One, in my industry, they can do the regulating. Number two is they can regulate panhandlers. We don't have to have the police department going out there all the time and patrol officers doing it. Get yourself a code enforcement officer to do it. Or if we have an existing code enforcement officer, have them educated enough that we can go ahead and teach them the law of this. That's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My first time to be at one of these things. My name's Kevin Shoemake. That's my wife, Patty Shoemake, sitting back there, and my mother-in-law's in the audience as well. And I've been in Victoria all my life, and panhandling is becoming an epidemic. I understand the First Amendment rights, and that's something I'm concerned about as well, as Mr. Compton pointed out, and also as your lawyer pointed out. This is a really fine line to walk here because you're crossing a threshold of impeding on people's rights. But on the other hand, we've got panhandlers coming from out of town, working this city, as a career. And if you look at it, there's a guy that actually found all this information, and you can find all this information right on that page. And every one of these people are related. It's a family. They're coming here as a family, and they're actually in these groups posting and making threats to us, telling us it's better to give $1 or $2 or we're going to break into your home. Come on. Something's got to be done. I take it seriously. When I pull up to a red light, I've got 3 daughters. I don't want my daughters pulling up at a red light, having to deal with some guy standing there banging on the window or spitting on her car because she won't give her money. You say it's not aggressive panhandling, but it is. It is becoming aggressive. Just the other day, after all this stuff kind of hit Facebook and everybody was making a big splash about it, me and my wife went out and we sat and we kind of watched one day just to see. And I watched a guy with 2 dogs standing on the corner across from the mall over there, sitting on a medium. And I watched a man during a green light slam on his brakes. The guy behind him locked up his brakes, skid his tires, almost hit the man just so he could give the guy stepping off the street to give him money. Something's going to happen. Somebody's going to get killed. And we're going to all sit back and wish we had done something. Other cities are doing things that are maybe not by the law with the First Amendment. I understand that. But, man, we got to do something. You know, Corpus took action. And, you know, this concerns me so much. I reached out to a city council member in Corpus, and I talked to that individual about it. And one of the things that they're doing with their CC, with Corpus Christi PD, that I think Chief Craig could do here, is make a video informing the public not to give to panhandlers, that it's actually hurting our homeless community. Our homeless community is not getting that money, like somebody else pointed out. It's the individual getting that money. And then he's taking that money back to somewhere around Houston area. It's not benefiting us. We're not getting taxes out of this money. The other thing is, oh man, there's so much to go over with this stuff that I've thought about. Corpus is going to do billboards, what I understand, to try to deter panhandling. I don't want Victoria to become a friendly to panhandler city. I'm sorry, I don't. I don't want to see a panhandler on every single corner holding a sign, which I think all of us have seen already. I don't know how to resolve this issue or if it can be resolved. But as our city representatives, you know, I'm tasking you guys to do more to try to find a way to curb this problem, because it is a problem. And I don't think anybody in here wants to take away from our true homeless people. We all care about people. You know, we all care about our brother and our sisters. And, you know, nobody wants to see homeless people, how do you say it, lose out because of an ordinance that's going to stop panhandlers from panhandling. One of the things that I found on the internet that I found interesting, in Austin, Texas, 92% of the pedestrian fatalities happen when people are in prohibited areas. They may change, you know, from walking from mediums to shoulders. 92% of fatalities is from that reason right there alone. You know, the other thing is, it's I don't know. I'm very passionate about this. There's a lot of it going on, and I'm imploring you guys to do something about this. Look into this a little bit further. Other cities took the step, you know, and they know there's a First Amendment problem. Maybe we need to do the same thing. I don't have the answer to that. Hopefully you guys can come up with something that works for everybody. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kim Pickens. I'm at 812 Blythe Road. I am the current president of the Victoria Area Homeless Coalition, and I am here to offer solutions. I know everyone has been very vocal about who is a panhandler and who hasn't. Basically, stalking someone that you believe is a panhandler and taking photos of them and placing them on the internet is probably not the best way to go about things. I've actually talked to a lot of those guys, and the 3 people that are in question had no reason to lie to me. I do not condone, nor do I basically have an issue with people panhandling, because once again, as was said earlier, you can hold your hand out, but somebody has to put money in that hand. So I'm not debating whether or not it's right or wrong to panhandle. The issue that people are asking is what can be done. Everyone feels powerless, everyone feels helpless. I actually spoke to the city of Albuquerque last week. They have a program called A Better Way. Obviously, Albuquerque is a far cry bigger than Victoria. However, our panhandling issue, we have about probably 20 people in this city that panhandle, 3 of which are the people in question that have caused such a disturbance. I wish I could have hired them to do a promotion for our Victoria Area Homeless Coalition thing, since I've been striving to get that kind of attention for years now, and they've managed to do it in a couple of months. The City of Albuquerque's Better Way program is an actually city-funded program. I spoke with the mayor's office. They found $50,000 in there that was going back to their general fund. And with that money, they actually created a program in conjunction with a nonprofit they already had a contract with through the city. they asked them if they would take on the project. The project is basically 2 days a week where they have a truck that drives around and finds people that are out panhandling, asks them if they would like to make money. They go out to a designated location to go and do basically beautification. They are paid at the end of the day in cash through the nonprofit organization. They are not required to have an ID, which is a big barrier for most people when they're trying to work. So that is something that would be an option and a possibility for people who are panhandling, who are not able to work because they don't have an ID or an address. One of the other things is vouchers. There are cities, and there are good and bad things that have happened, where cities have created vouchers where you can use a voucher instead of cash in order to purchase food, be able to use a laundry, be able to do things that we take for granted. When you have cash, anything that you need to do being done with the voucher system, where if people feel compelled to help someone that's standing out on the street, they could actually give them a voucher, a book of vouchers that would be able to help people. So like I said, throwing that out there as an idea too. One of the things, as Mr. Rivera had pointed out, is a barrier with having IDs. If I know I posted something regarding a law in California that was passed last year, where basically if you were certified by a homeless provider, that you could, as a homeless person, get a free birth certificate and a free driver's license in order to get yourself into services. Because without those things, you can't get a job, you can't get housing, you can't do anything. So if there was an ordinance to be passed, I would suggest looking into providing free birth certificates here locally for people who've been certified as homeless who are in need of those documents. I also suggest that if people have issues, that they come to Victoria Area Homeless Coalition meetings and partner up with us. We are only as good as all the people who are a part of that, all the organizations, all the individuals that are passionate. And it's Tracy that dances on the corner. As far as permits go, when you talk about permits, having somebody have a permit, it doesn't matter if it was a $100 permit or a free permit for someone who's homeless. If you have the same standards that we have for anybody else, you have to have some kind of ID and you have to have an address. So like I said, once again, we are creating barriers instead of creating solutions. So anyway, those are my time is almost up, so I appreciate you guys for looking into this, and I'm always willing to talk about this with anybody. And I don't know if anybody has any questions specifically about any of these things, but thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Lisa Griffin. I live at 104 North Liberty Street here in downtown Victoria. I am the Director of Homeless Prevention at Midcoast Family Services, and I've been hearing a lot about what people see on Facebook, but I wanted to give you some real numbers that aren't Facebook or internet related. On January the 21st, Victoria did a point-in-time homeless count. That's a count that's held across the nation. On one day every year, the organizations go out and they try to tally up how many people are literally homeless. And so when we did that this year in Victoria, these are the numbers that we came up with. The total number of homeless is 138 people. That total includes 30 youth who are under 18. The total number of those 138 who have a disability is 62. The total includes 28 of those 62 people who have more than one disability. The total number of elderly in that number, that 138, is 9. The total number of veterans is 7. The total number of chronic homeless people in Victoria is 28. What it means to be chronically homeless is to be homeless 4 times in the last 3 years, or for 1 solid year. So there's a group of people, there's a group of 28 people here who are chronically homeless. And part of that reason is because of the things that they talked about. Imagine keeping your Social Security and your ID outside your house in a backpack, and then how safe would you feel with it there? If you lose it, then you have to have money to have that, get that back. I also wanted to bring up some other points. I had a question to the attorney. I wanted to know, what is the difference between people who are flipping signs for a Pizza Hut on the sidewalk and panhandling who are also on the sidewalk. Are you looking at doing an ordinance to curb that as well? Because it's a distraction. It's a safety matter. I also just wanted to say, I think it would be silly for Victoria to spend a bunch of money on trying to pass an ordinance and to hire police force or extra staff to go out and do that. I don't think that's necessary. I don't think we have the number of people who are panhandling that would require that. If you are uncomfortable, you just shouldn't give money. If you don't feel encouraged to give, then don't give. I don't like to get sprayed at the Dillard's perfume counter, so I don't go by there because I don't want to, I don't want to participate. It makes me uncomfortable. I don't want to have to say no, and I don't want to get squirted. I feel like that's aggressive, sales pitches. So I think it's similar to that, but I also think it would be a waste of Victoria's money. We do have a homeless situation here where there are people that we'd like to help. And by all means, please give money to Midcoast Family Services instead of anyone who's on the side of the road. We'd be happy to take it. And some of the things that we do with it is that we offer free showers on Thursdays to our homeless community because it costs $10 to get a day pass at the YMCA to take a shower. One of the other things we're looking into is providing some laundry vouchers because it's $2.25 to wash one load of clothes. It's another $2 to dry them. So that may not seem like a lot, but if you're sleeping outside and you've got blankets and sleeping bags, that can add up. And it's hard to live outside. It's not easy. They're sleeping in the rough. And so I just want to remind you that maybe that's not the best use of our money or our time. I think we should just try to work around it. And please, we'd be willing to work with you any way we can to make a difference in the community. We have some great relationships with those people who are homeless. And again, the majority of them are not out all day panhandling. They get what they need and they go back. They're not out at lunch because they're at Christ's Kitchen trying to get something to eat. They're at the laundromat trying to get something washed. Or they're spending 2 hours riding the bus for $1.50 from, Social Security to Midcoast, then to Midcoast over to, the food bank so they can get an ID. And then, of course, once they have that money, then they have to ride the bus back over to the municipal court to pick up their ID. So I think that there are some people who are doing it for a living, but to that I just say, well, don't shop where you don't want to support things. It doesn't matter if they're doing it for a living. If you don't want to give them money, don't give them money. If you do feel urged to give, please give it to Midcoast Family Services. Thank you.
Thank you.
Responsible for that, I promise you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jenny Stafford, and I live at 210 Weirden, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer at Midcoast Family Services. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you and others in the room tonight about the subject of panhandling and the impact that it's had on our community. As an advocate for the homeless, the current conversation and its aggressive tone is concerning to me. People in need have been asking for assistance from strangers from the beginning of time. Poverty is simply part of the human condition. It crosses over time and geographic boundaries. And locally, panhandling has been going on forever, as long as I am aware, but it didn't reach the public's consciousness until recently, when an influx of men arrived on the north side of town, apparently from another city, just for the purpose of panhandling. And just as poverty is part of the human condition, so is fraud and greed, and unfortunately it happens among people posing as homeless people as well. I don't know enough about those people to pass judgment or to make a decision about their plight or why they would even stand on the street and ask for money. But I do know homeless people that panhandle, and I can tell you that many of them depend on that for their daily needs, and their reasons for panhandling are varied. One asks for help because he's waiting for his veteran benefits to kick in. Another because he has a disability and he just can't get by on $700 a month. Another because his family was so sick and so dysfunctional, he never developed any kind of social skills to be able to work in a workplace. And I have to tell you, those homeless friends of mine that panhandle are just as mad as some of the folks that are in this room, because they know that the people that have come in from out of town as posers have changed the dialogue and have changed the discussion about what they're doing. If the stories are true and the posers have come and gone back to the big city with our money in their pockets, does it make sense now to punish those who are left behind and truly depend on the kindness of strangers for their daily bread? If no crime has been committed and no rules were broken, why do we remain mad at the truly needy? I've heard people say that the sight of panhandlers offends them. Some have gone as far as posting pictures online, perhaps thinking that shaming the poor and homeless will change their behavior. I would have to say that poverty offends me too, but I'm not mad at people who live in it. Homelessness is very offensive, but I'm not offended by people who are homeless. Hunger is very offensive, but yet how can you be mad at a hungry person? In closing, I'd like to read an excerpt from an article that Texas Homeless Network ran just this week that was written by another homeless advocate in another city. Perhaps it will answer some questions, and questions that I hear a lot, and you probably do too. Why don't the homeless just get a job? Why are they standing on the street corner? If they can stand at the street corner all day, they can stand the workforce all day. Why don't they pull themselves up by their bootstraps? Perhaps the words of this caseworker will help explain why we should show compassion rather than anger. Not all of our clients, meaning homeless, have addictions. Many are just broken and distrustful. We try to offer them a space and opportunity to put themselves back together as far as possible. But the trauma and abuse that some have experienced is beyond belief. Coping mechanisms of drink and drug abuse develop over time and become a shield that we have to work through. But many are damaged to the point that we cannot help. Rather than rushing to write an ordinance or to create a program or to hire new people to supervise our homeless people, perhaps we should all sit down together, service providers, community leaders, and our homeless populations, and see if we can't come up with something that would work for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Citizens communication still open. Okay, a lot of people here, so I don't want to cut it off too early. Oh, here we go. Nope, okay, you're leaving. Okay.
Mayor, we
Okay.
haven't heard from the food truck people. Anybody want to speak?
They're debating it over there, so.
They're going to keep their
It's
powder
not,
dry.
it's not necessary. I just, if y'all, okay. We just want to make sure. All right, so going once, going twice. We'll close citizens communication, and we'll move into the rest of our agenda. I do want to thank everyone for your your comments and respect for each other. Thank you very much for that. E3 is where we're going to start on. Do y'all want to, council?
I would say at least give them 2 seconds.
Let's give everybody a minute to file out.
You said everybody.
Huh? You got what you need for those food truck guys. Yes. We'll talk at the end of the week. I can't believe they're not interested in the rest of the meeting. I'm shocked. I'm hurt.
Beginning to think it's just me.
Yeah. You cleared the room.
It's a purple shirt.
It's spring.
Pretty.
I was almost tempted to just take a break, but we'll do that after a little bit if we need to. And let's go ahead and start. I'm assuming Mr. Alvarez will come in very shortly.
Sure. Item E3 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute the second addendum to the 1993 Containerized Commercial Solid Waste Collection and Disposal Services contract with Waste Management of Texas Incorporated to allow modified fees for the processing and disposal of recycled materials collected as a part of the curbside recycling program and declaring an effective date.
Council?
Make a motion to adopt E3.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. So I'm sure there's some discussion.
Darrell, before you begin, can I direct council's attention to a very minor correction that needs to be made in the resolution E3? Within the recital paragraphs that is above the bold line that says now therefore, there's a reference to the current recycling tipping fee. It says it is currently $23.97. That number should be $24.92. That is, it's what I call above the line. It's background information. It is not operative language within the resolution. In the interest of clarity, though, I would entertain a motion to change that number to $24.92 just to make it precise and accurate.
I move for that amendment.
Second.
We probably can vote on that right away. Is there any discussion on that? Y'all clear on it?
What's the amount again?
It should be 2492 as opposed to, it says 2397 in the CM1.
And that matches C3 then?
And that will then match the numbers in C3. That's correct.
You okay with that, Emmett? Okay. We need to vote. All in favor, say aye.
I wanted to ask,
We're just voting on just that little change.
Oh, okay.
You okay with it?
that's fine.
Okay.
That's
Those
fine.
opposed, same sign? Okay, so that amendment is made.
Okay,
Solis, you had a question?
yes.
Daryl does have a few.
I have a few
comments
things
that
to
y'all would
say
like
if you want to hear that
Okay.
first.
To go
Yeah.
through,
That's fine.
while we're here today.
Go right
Okay,
ahead.
first I want to introduce Raymond Franks. Raymond is the municipal marketing representative for Waste Management, who I've been working with through this process over the last 5-6 months. So Raymond's here to help with any questions. He's also got a handout that we'll hand out shortly of kind of a speech that someone from his company who's in charge of their recycling did recently that really does a good job kind of summing up what the thoughts were with the recycling industry a few years back and how things really didn't pan out the way people thought that they would. So with that, I've got just a few things that I want to talk about. First, we came to you earlier this year and we talked about issues with recycling. Some of those are, we talked about the green fence and we talked about China. China is the largest user of American recyclables. Everybody's seen the news. Their economy is really struggling right now, and what they're doing is they're finding ways to use those commodities from within their own country rather than taking from ours. Part of that was because a lot of ours that we were sending over there were not as clean as what they really wanted. So they've kind of taken a little bit different stance on what they were when recycling was a better market to be in. Another problem that we're all facing, and we see it with the economy, is oil prices. A lot of people don't know this, but petroleum products make up a lot of recyclable products. All of your plastics are petroleum-based products. It's now cheaper to make virgin products than it is to recycle. When you can make 3 new plastic bottles for the cost of recycling one, your industry is going to go ahead and make those virgin bottles. It's just cheaper. So we came to council in September of 2015 and we talked about those issues. And then Waste Management came to the city in that same month and said, look, we're having some problems here. The commodity market's dropped. We've kind of held the course for 2 years, but it's been 2 years, and we don't see the market coming back anytime soon. We need some help here. Otherwise, we can't continue to do this. So we talked to council and asked council, we'd like to go back to Waste Management, talk to them, see what we can negotiate in order to keep curbside recycling, trying to say that multiple times, because we think it's important for the environment. So as we did that, what you've got in front of you is what several months of negotiation has brought forth. And I'm just going to hit some of the highlights here that's changed. We have a tipping fee increase from $24.92 to now $95 per ton. What I'd like to explain about the tipping fee is that when we started this, the market was in much better shape than what it is now. But what that tipping fee covers, and it's highlighted in the contract, is that covers us dumping it on the ground, them picking it up, putting it in a compactor, and driving it 125 miles to Houston, and then sorting it. So we pay a tipping fee at the landfill as well, and that's to take care of the waste once we get it there. So that's what the increase is due to. It's moving that commodity from here to there. We also have a new fee, a processing fee that was not in the original contract. That processing fee is what Waste Management needs to make off that commodity on the back end in order for them to continue to do business. It's plain and simple. When you've got a business, you've got to make so much money in order to keep that business running. That $85 is what they need for every ton of commodity that rolls out as finished product from that MRF in Houston. What we've also added, though, is that any time that they exceed $85 a ton, whether it's $1 or whether it's $50 a ton, the city will receive 75% of that gain, that net gain. So if the market comes back, which we all hope that it will, how soon, we don't know, but at that point, the city would start to receive some revenue for anything recognized after the $85. Is there any questions kind of on how that works? Because I can answer these as I go, or we can wait to the end.
I understood it, but is it 100% of nothing is nothing? Because we don't expect you to get over that amount?
Right now it is. And that kind of goes into where the new rate hike of $1.64 comes into play. As Finance Department and I, Gilbert and I, sat down and worked through the process with Waste Management, we took a look at what the commodity markets are paying now, what we think the commodity markets might do, and what we think or what we hope that will eventually happen. And what we had to do was take that 85, and there's an example in the contract. Out of that 85, we figured that we're going to always get at least $40 a ton for everything finished product out the door. So that leaves us setting a tipping fee that we think that we're going to pay on a regular basis of $45 a ton, not the entire $85 a ton. Remember, we're going to pay the difference to make them whole at 85. Does everybody understand that?
So the tipping fee would be the 85 minus whatever?
Minus whatever they get going out the door.
I'm sorry, she's saying tipping fee. I think it's
Oh,
processing.
the processing fee. Well, you called it tipping the last word, so that's why I used your word.
Tipping fee is $95 straight across the board for every single ton. The $85 processing fee will be $85, but then once our product reaches the door, whatever they receive, they would subtract that from the 85 and bill us the difference. So if they sell it for 45, they would bill us 40 per ton.
Okay.
Not the $85.
Now,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
this was my question. Okay, at some point, it's going to go the other way, right?
Yes,
Right
ma'am.
now,
We
okay.
hope so.
Well, and if it doesn't, and we're opposite, is there going to be a time, or do we have a contract set for a certain amount of time, or is somebody going to be keeping track of that?
If the market goes up, of course, we'll be keeping track of that with our monthly reports that we get from Waste Management. Now, this contract that we currently have with Waste Management expires in 5 years. And if council will remember, 5 years ago, when I brought this to council, we said that we would bid this out at the end of this 10-year extension. So at that point, we would bid out everything. Does that answer your question?
Yes, because I just wanted to know that how long we're going to be at this stage right here.
At this stage right now, with this addendum to the contract, this would be for the next 5 years or until the city may deem that we cannot continue this program.
Okay. So we have an option to come back and amend the contract?
Absolutely.
Okay.
There's an escape clause right now.
Yes, sir, and I talked to Thomas and Waste Management this afternoon. We wanted to make sure that there is. And if you look in the contract, I believe it says that we're only responsible for taking them, solely Waste Management, what we pick up. Therefore, if we don't pick anything up, we don't have to take them anything. And Thomas was the one that agreed with me on that.
However, we're still subsidizing this $292 a month. I mean, yeah. Right, $292?
No, sir. If we cancel the program, the total amount goes away. The only recycling charge would be at that point would be the 65 cents for the household hazardous waste pickup, because remember that's figured into the total cost, not what we're talking about tonight.
Okay.
But before we get too excited, remind me again that yes, recycling is good for the environment, but it's extending the life of our landfill?
It is for every month that we recycle, we're saving about a day of landfill space. Now, we're probably going to save a little bit more as we see the volumes actually come down as the oil field drops off. Our volumes going into the landfill comes down, but we're seeing our recycle volumes go up. So we're making up more of that now than what we originally were even 6 months ago when we were getting all the oil field trash in. Because that was pushing the volume up higher. Our volume was moving up slowly. Now that volume's come down, ours has continued to grow. So we're keeping more out of there now than what we were 6 months ago.
Daryl, remind us what our percent of recycling customers we have in the city.
As of January, we had 13,511 customers out of 19,000 who recycled in January. That's just over 69% of the customers.
So just an average of cart pickup?
That is the total number of cart pickups for that month. Yes, sir.
Oh,
and that's only 2 weeks. That's not the whole month. I took just 2 weeks so that everybody got counted once. If you'll allow me to go on at this point. So the rate increase in the tipping fee would be an additional $1.64 to the current $1.28 that we charge, moving the fee to $2.92 a month. Also built into this contract, you will see that we put in an ability for cooperation between the city and Waste Management. If we get loads that come in there that are 30, 40, 50%, 60%, which we've seen some 60% loads in the past, contaminated, we can make the decision to pull that load out of there and take it to the landfill. We hate to do it, but if we send a 60% load to Waste Management, guess where it's going to go at a much higher rate than what we would pay here. It's a decision that won't be taken lightly, but still has to be made if contamination becomes an issue. Right now, our last audit was in the 20% range. We're doing great. You know, the advertising, the work that staff did has really brought that down. And if we can maintain that, we shouldn't have to act on that. But if Waste Management calls us and says, hey, we've got a couple of things here, we can always run over there and pull that out real quick, and the rest of the load's fine. We won't scrap a whole load unless there's just nothing we can do. If somebody put a gallon of oil in there, there's nothing we can do about that. We're going to have to scrap that load. Another thing that we put in there, and we've had some issues over the past couple of years about cleanliness of the site. You will notice that the site needs to be kept broom clean, and if it's not cleaned up in a certain amount of time, once the city notifies Waste Management, we can clean it up and then bill them to pay us back for our efforts to clean it up. I don't think we'll have that problem, but it's something that we felt we needed to add in there to make sure it was covered. And then last, and possibly one of the biggest things, is that in order to make this feasible, we had to make some tough decisions on some items. Glass. Glass has historically been a big loser in the recycling business, and it's gotten worse. And one of the things that we have with glass is it's heavy. That drives up our tonnage rate. So we have elected to take glass, and then part of our biggest problem with contamination has been all the different kinds of plastic that we can't control. The two highest value plastics, because remember, we want to reach that $85. We don't want the things that aren't worth money to be knocking us down as we're trying to move up, are the plastics 4, 5, 6, and 7. Plastics 1 and 2 are very good, easy to recycle plastics that are worth the most money. So our new program, if this passes tonight, will be no more glass accepted and no more plastics 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. I'm sorry, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. We will accept plastic 1 and plastic 2 only. This will help us move closer to that $85 commodity rate that we need to be at in order to see a return come back to the city.
Do we have something on our website to explain exactly the difference between a plastic 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7?
Yes, sir, we do. Right now, all that will be changed subject to the decisions that are made tonight. And then there will be a fairly extensive campaign put out to make sure people are aware of what the new changes are and how they work. And Waste Management has agreed to work with us over the next several months without hitting us for all that extra 2s, 3s, 4s, and glass while we get the word out and work with the public to try and remove. We're never going to remove all of those items, but try and remove as much of those items as possible from our waste stream. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Errol, I'd like to, before, just to make sure council understands, Waste Management does have the right in this contract to come back and ask for a CPI adjustment.
They do. They have a right to come back and ask for a CPI, thank you, City Manager, for both the $95 and the $85. However, we have aligned those that they will come back as part of our budget process, which means they will take effect in October, just like all of our other rate fees. So it won't be one in April and then one in October. They will both be in October and line up with our rate fee increases for the landfill, the compost facility, and our commercial customers.
Mr. Alvarez, you had.
I think that we ought to look at another option. We're saving 12 days a year, basically.
Yes, sir. For right now, it will increase as landfill, as our volume in our landfill slows down a little bit with the economy if recycling doesn't slow down.
Why don't we look at, how do I put this? The city basically bidding itself. In other words, what can the landfill, what can the city, let's just take it to the landfill and charge the city a certain adjustment here. And not recycle. And put that money, whatever that would be, back into, future growth of the landfill, or what's that other reserve fund that we're trying to always maintain? Closure. Take that money that we're going to be able to bill the customer, may not be this amount, it may be close to, or somewhere in between, and dedicate it to the closure or dedicate it to future growth of the landfill.
So you wouldn't stop charging the customer the
No.
dollar? You would still-
I wouldn't know what that, it might be not as high as what's being proposed here.
Okay.
But to spend the recycling, sending it off to Houston or wherever it's going and trying to bid it in this, put it in this commodity market where we're losing significantly, I'm not convinced that this is coming back anytime soon. We need another strategy.
Do you continue to pick it up, you mean?
Still pick it up.
And just take it to the
And still
landfill.
charge our customers up to a certain amount that makes it profitable to put it in the landfill and use that money to either recover
But you wouldn't separate it, though. We would no longer do a recycling. Everything would go in the gray can, and everything would go to the...
We would just go back to
we would
strictly
suspend recycling.
automated service.
And take all that, but there would be that additional fee, whatever it's going to take for either speed up the closure or some cost recovery based on, how many days we're going to lose as opposed to sending it somewhere else for recycling purposes. That's a question to contemplate.
I'd like to see some more on that, because what I see right now in this rate increase, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Lesak, I don't see any risk to Waste Management in this contract. They're guaranteed their profit on it, and it's profit that's being paid by the taxpayer to participate in a recycling program that doesn't do anything. And I'm not faulting them for that.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. For the three of you I haven't met, my name is Raymond Franks, and yes, I do work for Waste Management. You ask an excellent question, and council member, you and I have discussed before too on some of these issues. That's kind of your choice. We've reached a situation where the blended value of the product that we bring out of here and everywhere else across the Southwest is fallen from about $150 a ton the month we signed this. A year ago, it had fallen to $66 a ton. It's just reached, And it's not just Victoria, Texas. We've renegotiated contracts with Houston. We've renegotiated contracts with San Antonio, Dallas, and many of them weren't this favorable. Of course, we have the transportation issue that is a separate issue where we take it to Houston. I don't want to lead you down one road or the other. Your point being, yes, the option is there to stop recycling and take it to your landfill. I had a neighboring city, had a conversation with the assistant finance director about 2 months ago. They were renewing. We were hauling their recyclables and processing. I gave him the rates. He called me back and said, Raymond, I can put it in the ground with you for cheaper than what you're asking. And I said, yes, sir, you can. But that's a decision. We're a green company. Not only do we have the majority of landfills across the United States, we by far invest more money in processing recyclables than anybody else in this industry across the United States. So we have a vested interest in this.
Can I?
But we're bleeding.
I want one point.
Yes, sir.
Hasn't that always been true? The day we started this, it would have been cheaper to put it in the ground. Is that a true statement?
I'm not sure at $150 a ton, Mayor.
Darrell was thinking, yes.
Well, and the product we could get rid of, he alluded a while ago to the 3, 4s, 5s, 6, and 7s of the plastics. Yeah. That's the stuff that used to go to China. We could bail it all up, and everybody in the United States, all the competitors, everybody bailed that all up and put it on boats and sent it to China, and we still made money on that marginal material. I can sit up here for an hour and talk about it. I noticed 3 council members turning the bottle open and trying to find the 2 on those bottles. If you'll think back 5 years ago, those of you like me that drink a lot of bottled water, that bottle used to be a lot more substantial. It takes a whole lot more bottles in a bale now, a lot more work to get that bale for that plastic. One modification to what Darrell said a while ago, we don't have any trouble getting rid of 1s and 2s, and that's not totally accurate. I heard one of our recycling folks last month talking about 2 months ago, we were having issues marketing our 1s and our 2s in plastics. We're not here to throw our hands up and say we're done with it. Obviously, we're not. But yes, it's going to cost some money to continue to go down this road. And we understand the decisions that y'all are trying to make.
And Mayor, to answer your question, when we started this, we were paying $24 and change, just a little bit less than what we're currently paying. And the landfill rate was $27. So it was about a $3 difference. Now our landfill rate's $29. Our new tipping fee rate is $95.
So with the capital investment, the human investment, and then you offset the savings in the landfill life, maybe break even, is that a safe assumption? Maybe.
I'm not prepared to answer that.
It's all right. That's all right.
But that's my question, Mayor, that we ought to do some analysis to see what the cost benefit is going to be that option.
Well,
I would like to look at that as well.
My point was that that's why the government does it, because it isn't efficient. It's an emotional thing. People want to feel like they're doing, a good deed and all that. I mean, it would be great if those markets were way up there and we were making an impact. It's just, anyway. Mr. Halpaska.
Oh, I just was asked more or less a question than anything. Just like the oil field glut brought down the price of a barrel of oil, is the success of recycling across the United States brought down recyclable materials in a like manner?
Oh, sure. Most assuredly. And we were talking before we came out here earlier. I said, which plant's closing down south towards Point Comfort? And they quickly pointed out it's Alcoa. Alcoa's closing that plant down because the price of aluminum has gone down. Well, that's your golden child in this industry, is the price of aluminum. And so that has just gone way down. Many of the products we just simply can't get rid of. One other point I'd like to make, and just real quickly, for those of you that obviously weren't here, this is all part of the 17th Amendment that was done back in, and Charmel knows the date, and I don't, August 2011 is when it was signed. That's when it was at $147. It was inked, done. Part of that amendment was we brought At Your Door special waste collection to Victoria. That was part of that settlement. We went from an evergreen contract to a fixed term, which Darrell has already gone through. And one other item that I have to point out while I'm up here is Waste Management gave the city of Victoria $1 million worth of carts, $20,000 or 20,000 carts at that time. So And I don't think anybody's implying that we're walking away from anything here, but it's not like we haven't invested in this program too. We've got our hearts in this thing too, and we do care how it turns out.
Those carts are already at their life, you would think?
No, sir. We've got several years left out of those carts before they reach their life. We've ordered more the last 2 years, but that's been because of requirements, people calling in, requesting extra carts.
Well, first, I'm willing to go on record and say that I do support recycling. And, I don't really like the fact that we're having to have this conversation, but I understand the economics of it too. But I want to ask Mr. Alvarez, and I know we're just kind of having a discussion, but in something that he suggested of stopping the recycling, and then it sounded like he was suggesting that we continue picking it up and perhaps taking it to the landfill. And then Ms. Garrett talked something about putting it all in the gray carts. And I just kind of want to throw out there that right now, in a 2-week period, we're picking up the gray carts twice and the green cart once. And if we were to discontinue this program, what would happen? Because basically you've got a half a cart of trash a week that would not be picked up unless people were getting a second cart. My point being, a lot of folks do have an awful lot of items that they put in those recycle carts, and I just want to factor in that expense to us of picking up if people would have to get a second cart. Did that make sense? That basically you've got 3 different carts worth of trash being picked up.
So it's cheaper, the $292 is cheaper than an additional gray cart.
Well, that's true.
Is that kind of where you're going?
Well, and just sort of throwing out there the reality of, if we discontinue the recycling, what are we really talking about?
And we've kind of looked at that. We've kind of looked at several aspects, not knowing where we would end up tonight. And one of the things we've looked at is that if we move that volume, you're talking right now about 3,500 tons a year to the solid waste side. That is going to require that we're going to pick up that 3,500 tons somewhere. Now, you're going to have some areas that are going to have more and some areas that are going to have less, but what we're going to have to do is the solid waste departments, we're going to have to look at where those tons are going to show up in those gray carts, and then we're going to have to adjust routes again and move things around. You're not looking at we do away with recycling, you can get rid of 2 trucks and 2 drivers. It's not going to work that way because we've still got that volume that's now going to move over that we're going to have to take care of. And until we get that, figure out where it's at, get it routed, and work into it a few months, once it transfers over, then we can kind of figure out, okay, we can live with 1 less guy, 1 less truck, or we can't. I mean, you've got 2 trucks running every week picking up recycling now, starting this year. And last year and the years before, we had 1 truck that was running 13, 14 hours a day picking up recycling. So you're going to be moving that, even though it's every other week, you're still going to impact that 3,500 tons is going to show up on that side. Deciding what it might do to the rate, as Mr. Alvarez said, or what the new rate might be, we're going to have to work through that as we see how much of that volume picks up and where it's at and how much route time we're going to have to spend to pick that up. It's not something just you shut off one and you can get rid of that. It is going to make a difference on the solid waste side.
And for the homeowners too.
And for the homeowners as well. Because if you're doing that and we pick up all the green carts, a lot of people are used to having 2 carts now. And they can make it with 2 carts. They're going to be wanting an extra gray cart. So we can do multiple things, but we've still got to come up with those carts to put them out on the street at the $5 extra.
We can spray paint them gray.
We can.
We would still charge them $5.
Mr. Alvarez has a question.
It's still $5. But at that point, if we do that, it really doesn't matter what color the card is, honestly, because they're all going to be
All
trash
on the same
cards.
place, all right. Mr. Alvarez.
Well, I mean, this would be a total shock to the system if we were to deviate. Tell me, if we go ahead with this plan in front of us, is it for a year, or I forget the contract?
It's a 5-year contract. I mean, we can come back to Waste Management and say, we want to stop at any point if we agree to move forward with this contract.
So that would be, I think, a more practical solution, so it wouldn't be such a shock to the system as we work through other options, including terminating or suspending recycling a year from now, to give everybody a chance to kind of either the pro and con, I guess you would say, to that idea. Or maybe nobody wants to even consider it.
Gil, do you have any input on this?
Just tell me no.
Well, I mean, are you
Once-
needing his opinion on whether we should recycle or not? Or are you needing his opinion on a dollar amount?
Trying to get the financial detail of it.
Oh, I think.
Perhaps he has a clearer insight on the numbers.
Well, I've been working very closely with Daryl, and it comes down to recycle, yes or no. Back to Mr. Alvarez deal, that's it. One idea would be go forward with this. You got a budget coming up pretty soon. One of the items in the budget, we can come up with some options that y'all won't consider down the road. Not necessarily do it right now, but at least they're an option. But in the meantime, you have this going on, and you move forward with this. And during the budget process, Daryl can come back and present some other options as Mr. Alvarez suggested, or maybe some other ones. So at that time, you'll be able to look at some other options that's viable. That's just the only comments I have.
Andrew, did you want to say something?
I
Then I
just-
want to go next.
Well, that's fine. Looking at the numbers, we got a sweetheart of a deal when we started this recycling, it sounds like.
Yes, sir, we did, and we started this actually in 2012, February 6th of 2012 to be exact. And we have not had a rate increase from that $1.28 since we started.
It made recycling very easy. I mean, it feels good inside, but it made financial sense as well. Now we're getting to a point where
And Raymond will tell
and
you,
we've got to figure this out from a financial standpoint, and how much is your love for I won't say planet Earth, but recycling in from there, but there's no commodities.
and Raymond will tell you that we went from the caveman days to the cream of the crop. You could not get any better recycling than what City of Victoria has right now, because not only do you put it all in one can, and it's every other week, the only suggestions I've heard to make it better is to do it every week. And
It's a benefit of being a late adopter, and there are benefits.
It is.
It's a single stream, it's easy, you bet it, if I may, that, you stole my words, because it has been a sweetheart deal, I recognize that. I had asked staff about what other cities charge, I think Daryl gave you all a copy of this, and while earlier we were sitting here, I had such a busy day, but I looked up, New Braunfels is not on here, they're $4.26. Relying on a quick cursory look on the internet. Beaumont, which I think Waste Management does, is $10 a month. And I don't know if that's not a single stream or what.
It's not my area, and I would caution you on all of those, and we had this conversation with Gil this afternoon. When you start looking at it, you call a city and say, what are you charging for recycling? Many of your business people, and you understand that you throw a number out. It may not be an all-in number. It may be subsidized by another department, particularly garbage collection in that city. It may be subsidized by any number of issues. So I would caution you. In Beaumont, I'm not familiar with it, Mayor. I know they have a big franchise fee down there of about 20% to operate there. So some of that could be covering that number.
I guess my point is, and I agree with you, those numbers should be suspect. But going from $1.28 to $2.92, still, $2.92 is lower than almost Corpus Christi's $1.93. Much larger market, much more materials, not as comparable. College Station, $3.18.
And Corpus Christi has a guaranteed payback from Republic that they negotiated long ago. And Republic is, I'm sure, trying to get out of it. They just haven't been successful yet.
Well, this was the most, has it been 10 years I've been here? The most supported program I've ever seen. I've never received more positive contact from the public. And so we do things that don't make money. We don't make money off Riverside Park. It costs money. Obviously, that's not, too comparable here, but It's just one of those things. So I would encourage council to just go ahead and support this. Perhaps things will change in a year. Mr. Alvarez raised good points. If there's a time where it's not worth it, we'll readdress it. We've got a significant capital investment in it. It's almost as if the cheapest alternative is to continue to pick it up, as opposed to changing the way we do everything. I don't know. It's interesting in here, and tell me if I'm right, or I may be misunderstanding. When you look at a load and determine if that load is contaminated, that goes to the landfill and reduces our overall cost.
Right, it'll be dumped at $29 instead of.
It's kind of like doing what Mr. Alvarez says, that's a stopgap. If we keep getting those loads, that'll help a little, but then at some point in the future, if we do need to just absolutely pull the plug, we still can.
Our goal is to reach that $85 and above. And we plan on doing that by, one, watching what we send, but then also kind of tuning up, per se, what we accept to try and reach that goal.
Okay. And, this is purely cost recovery. We're not, just for the public to hear that, we're just trying to, we have to unfortunately pass the cost through to keep the program going.
I don't think it's just that, though, in my mind. I can support it tonight, but I really want to see what Mr. Alvarez brought up. If we're saving 12 days for each month, are we?
For a year.
For each year.
For each year?
Yes, sir.
You're talking 30 years.
Well, it's a losing operation.
I know, but if that money was going towards the landfill, could we buy the land and extend to 30 years?
Oh, yeah.
I'm saying keep the money. Two more points. This is not a good business decision, and we're compelled up here to make good business decisions. So it really isn't. So what are other options and alternatives? I think we need to explore them at least. Staff is not even recommending that we pass this. I don't see it nowhere where staff is recommending this.
Well, I did not put it on there, but staff's recommendation at this point is that we move forward with this.
Thank you for saying that. But again, it goes back to is it a good business decision? It's just not.
And I think the reason when you have 70% participation in a program, that's indicative of us that the public is supporting the recycling program. So now, once the public finds out their rate's going up this much, they may be lined up like the Panhandler folks were. So.
But it's 30 years right now to extend the life of the landfill by 1 year.
Well, and the land is relatively inexpensive. It's the other parts that go with it. But I guess what I'd also like to point out, $35.04 a year for total recycling. $292 times.
12.
It's more about it's more about whether this community wants to have a green, community or not, and whether they support recycling. I don't think anybody will disagree that recycling is expensive to do. It's just a matter of what's the attitude of the community.
Yeah.
So you say 70% are participating. If you bump that number even higher participation, is that going to help at all, you think, Daryl? More going into the stream, getting more recycling than that?
If we're recycling the right things, it can help. If we're not recycling the right things, it's not going to. We projected that we would see 40% participation when we started this, if y'all will remember. We're setting at 70. We started up above 90. So it's backed off, but even on our worst weeks, we're not seeing 50, we're seeing 60. So it's still something that's being used. It hadn't dropped off like Gilbert, myself, and Jerry James thought it would.
And I hate to do memory work because my memory's not as good as it used to be. But I believe when we first started looking at a recycling program, wasn't our anticipated cost around $4 to $5 a month?
When we first came to council back then, and this is after we went to the automation side, then we started looking at exploring the brush and recycling. We were encouraging the $4 area, but then it was such a shock of a number at that time, so we kind of did a piecemeal type of thing, and we started off real small, and then gradually came back and increased that fee to where it should have been.
So, so really and truly, like we said earlier, it was a sweetheart of a deal for what we got it.
We would not have gotten this deal had we not been renegotiating a contract, plain and simple. That's the only reason we got this deal, along with the other things that we got as part of that contract.
Okay. Good discussion. So we're on E3, right? E3. Then,
So, Mrs. Garrett, I can get some numbers by working with Mr. Lesak on different options, what to do to extend the landfill, and I'd love to have Mr. Alvarez, and, you know,
Like,
during the budget presentations and those work
yes,
sessions.
sir, be glad to do that. Yes, sir,
that would
not a
be good
problem.
Good information, and try to, of course, it's a fluctuating market, so
It's a commodity, and we have to remember it's a commodity.
Right.
So, but yes, sir, we'll be glad to flesh.
You may be forced to anyway. If this thing really keeps going down, I mean,
Yeah.
it keeps getting even more expensive, you're not gonna have a choice at one point. I don't know where that is, that threshold.
that's true.
It's kind of what the public's tolerance is going to be, really and truly.
But all
Since it's a pass-through, since the public's paying for it.
That's just my opinion. It
All of
costs
these
more
state-
energy to recycle than it does to not recycle.
Yeah, I think you're correct.
I think that's always
No, I
been the
think that's
case.
all it-
Yeah,
yes,
and
that's
so I
exactly
don't know
what
what we're
Subsidize.
accomplishing by recycling sometimes.
Sure.
That barrel of oil that's, till it gets up to a certain amount, you know, now at 30, you can do just about anything.
Well, when we first put this in, as y'all recall, there was a lot of sentiment saying anything that has to be subsidized is not going to work in the long term. And we knew it was subsidized up front, or else we wouldn't have to pay the extra fee. And that when we have land out there near our landfill that could be bought at relatively cheap price compared to when you talk about a place like Houston or some other place. Nothing is cheap, but I mean, on a scale, that we could always expand that landfill less expensively than we could do this program. But the public wanted it. But even at the time, I said, you know, we could dump it in the landfill and make more sense. It's like subsidizing ethanol and you're burning up your food to bake it. But the public wanted it.
And just for clarification, I mean, the city's not subsidizing it, the rate's paying for the recycling that the citizens are paying for, so.
Yes. The citizens are paying the subsidy.
Yes, they are. There you go.
I think it's a great idea to examine it a little closer during the budget and see there, you know, so, okay. Only time will tell. Is there any further discussion?
I just have one more question. Daryl, you mentioned that in coming October, we would see 2 increases.
There will not be an increase for the curbside recycling this October. We've already arranged it with Waste Management. We get to skip this October because we're coming in the middle of the year. So we won't see the first increase until next year. And Raymond made a good point. There is a maximum that they can go up. So the only increase that we may see this year from Waste Management will be on the commercial garbage pickup, and that's all based off CPI, as are these rates.
Okay.
Anything further? If not,
Let's keep going with our education.
We're working very hard to keep that going, and if this passes, we'll be working even harder next week.
okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Franks.
We need to do the fee
Yep.
Item C3 is an ordinance amending the Chapter 24 of the Victoria City Code related to fees to increase the environmental services curbside recycling fees from $1.28 per home per month to $2.92 per home per month, beginning on March 1st, 2016, repealing all conflicting ordinances, providing for codification and savings, and declaring an effective date.
Yeah, we have to do this one, guys. Okay. Let's open, thank you for the reminder. We do need a public hearing on this. Let's open the public hearing on C3. If ever anyone would like to come forward to speak to this item only, now is the time. Okay. Seeing no one jump up, we'll close the public hearing on C3, and I'll entertain a motion.
Move we adopt C3.
A second.
We have a Motion is second. And
We're going from $1.28 to two, what?
$2.92.
$2.92.
$2.92. Thank you, sir.
We probably covered most of the discussion already. I would assume there's not much else. I don't see anything. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay, C3 passed.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
And I do, it was good to see the broom sweeping and keeping that area clean. I've had a few contacts about that, so I hope that y'all make a little effort there. I appreciate that very much. Thank you. Okay, C4?
C4 is a public hearing to receive comment on the proposed annexation of approximately 123.15 acres of land in two geographical areas near the edge of the city and associated service plan.
This is a public hearing only. There's no action for us to take, so I'll open the public hearing on C4. If anyone wants to come forward and speak specifically to this item, now would be the time. And just, okay. Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing on C4. Thank you.
Consent agenda. There are 3 items on the consent agenda tonight that will be approved by a single vote. They are first, the approval of minutes of the regular meeting of February 2nd, 2016. Second, a resolution approving payment for the repair of one high service pump and one medium service pump in use at the surface water treatment plant to be done by Odessa Pumps in the amount of $40,763.19, authorizing the city manager to execute all documents necessary to complete the repairs and declaring an effective date. And the third is a resolution approving change order number 2 to water plant number 3 improvement project at 3209 North Ben Jordan Street with Peyton Construction Incorporated to increase the contract amount by $50,650, bringing the total of the contract amount to $1,140,220, authorizing the Director of Public Works to execute the change order and declaring an effective date.
Making motion, we approve items on the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. Just real quick, do we need a break? It's 7. It's been 2 hours. I don't know how much longer we have. Do y'all? Okay. Just keep going? Okay. E1.
Item E1 is a resolution granting a variance to Section 21-82A1 of the Victoria City Code related to subdivision and development, which requires a minimum lot size of 6,000 square feet for property located at 2505 Black Street, owned by Deborah and Arthur Gonzalez, and declaring an effective date.
Will we adopt E1?
Second.
Motion. Second. Another second? Okay. Any questions about E1? Any discussion? Okay. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Thank you. E2?
E2 is a resolution granting a variance to Section 21-82A1 and 21-82A2 of the Victoria City Code related to subdivision and development, which requires a minimum lot width of 50 feet and a minimum lot size of 6,000 square feet for property located at 902 South Cameron Street, owned by Geraldine Peoples, and declaring an effective date.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Thank you. E4.
E4 is a resolution designating all areas within the municipal court building at 107 West Warren Street as essential to the municipal court operation and declaring an effective date.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any questions on E4?
Have some discussion.
Okay. Discussion.
Going through the code passed by the state, I didn't see where the lobby should be included in this.
And I guess the thinking behind that is that we're using, part of the penal code where it's talking about those areas essential to the court operation, and really looking at the foyer kind of serves two different purposes. Folks may be there waiting to actually see people at court administration, or actually waiting to come into court to see the judge. So we were looking at combining the foyer as essential to the court operation.
Would you consider the areas of the Capitol to serve similar functions in Austin?
I don't know that we would even opine on that.
Well,
Andrew?
it's legal to carry within the Capitol. I see no difference between our lobby and the Capitol in Austin. And that reason, I want to make a motion to amend E4 to replace all areas in the language with the court administration offices and the courtroom, as opposed to all areas.
That's just to remove the lobby.
Having, I know there's not a second, but having been in that lobby from time to time, it's more crowded there sometimes than in the courtroom. It's for purposes of people getting to the clerks and so forth. So I think when he's saying that it's essential to the work of the court.
And the hallways of the.
Let's wait till we get a second. Okay, I apologize, but let's see.
Second, I second that
Okay,
motion.
we have a second, so we can go ahead and discuss.
So the corridors of the Capitol serve the exact same purpose. I've seen that packed, hard to get around. Is the corridor?
I think at the end of the day, it's our opinion that that foyer does serve as an essential function of the court. If council wishes to override that opinion, then we will post our notices as they come in, and we'll abide by council wishes. But we talked long and hard about this. When the laws came out, we had numerous discussions and talked with the municipal court clerk and the judge, what their opinions were. Andrew and Thomas had numerous conversations. So that's our recommendation.
And the prosecutor.
I
The
forget.
Capitol, Councilman, is not a court, there's no court that I'm aware of in the Capitol.
But it's a meeting of a governmental entity.
But I think they're
Doesn't
going
have to
under.
be court only.
That is actually a different subsection of the law. And if I may, Andrew, if you don't mind me chiming in a little bit here, having worked with the court for several years, there is no other place in this building for a citizen to stand at the window and pay their fine except in that foyer. The only place that a citizen can pay their fine and conduct the business of the court is to stand there in the lobby. So in my opinion, it is essential to the operation of the court.
Yes.
And I would argue that that's not, I think it's a fine window. It's not a undefined court to be what's going on inside here.
I guess it would be a minor inconvenience if someone is approaching the door out there and they have their handgun, they would need to turn around and go put it back in the car. That's really what we're talking about here, and staff is asking us for that.
We would in essence put the signs on the double doors here instead of on the outside double doors.
Yeah, I understand.
I'm just a big Second Amendment supporter. I don't even like that there's in state statute that prohibits it anyway. Because,
And this is the only building.
I know.
700 Main, you can carry in there?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Hopefully more people are conducting business there and not here, but we don't want to have to see them in municipal court. But. Okay. So.
I was going to
Mr.
point out
Alvarez?
that, without having a security officer there or a machine to scan, people are going to walk in and, if they have it, they're not showing it, but, they have it under their coat or something, you won't necessarily know.
The county has, I guess, their metal detectors.
Yeah.
It puts the onus back on the licensee.
Right. So you take that risk, of course, but we're not putting a metal detector out there.
And we do have, Officer Soto is here, every day. So,
During municipal court?
yes, he's
Oh.
assigned, I
Okay, I didn't know that.
But he's not in the lobby typically. He's back there and we're in here.
Well, the point being is that
Yeah.
they're not being searched to come into the building to enforce that.
That's correct.
It's a good discussion. So we're on the amendment to basically remove the lobby from this. We have a motion and a second. Any other questions? It's very clear, I think. Okay, all in favor of the amendment, raise your right hand.
The amendment? No.
In favor of removing the lobby, we have two. Okay. Opposed to removing the lobby, same sign, raise your right hand. Okay. Okay, thank you, council. So now we're back to just E4 as it is whole. Is there any questions further on it? Okay. Seeing no further questions, all in favor of E4, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
One. Thank you. E5.
Item E5 is a resolution ratifying the city manager's execution of an easement and right-of-way agreement with AEP Texas Central Company, granting AEP the necessary rights to install the electrical service on city property located on North Street that is currently leased by Victoria Livestock Show, and declaring an effective date.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Any discussion?
Is this going to be underground?
I assume so. Kobe's going to help answer that.
Bucknott, the service has already been put in and it's above ground wiring.
The diagram is not too descriptive. I mean, I can't tell where it's at. Can you give us a little bit of an insight on that?
If you're in the back of the community center and you know where where the Livestock Association's barn is, it's behind that. Our major parking lot, and it's right back behind there. They use it for extra parking, some RV spaces during the livestock show. So that's where it is. It's a small line. I think there's 3 poles that was put in.
Any further comments or questions? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. All right. E6.
E6 is a resolution granting variances to section 10-115 and 13-27 of the Victoria City Code, which prohibit a person from installing a septic tank within 1 mile of an existing city sewer service main for property known as Block 2, Range 2, East Above Town Farm Lot 1, Tract 4, located at 2019 North Main Street, owned by Lauren Weitzel, and declaring an effective date.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. I have a question if no one else does.
I do too.
Lynn, this is the house on Main next to Kubota Tractor. It's back behind that front house?
That's me, that's correct.
Doesn't Kubota have access? Why don't we have?
Well, these people, this property actually has access to Main, although it's up there immediately adjacent to Kubota's, pretty close to Kubota's Drive there. The problem is the sewer line is in the outermost northbound lane. And so in order to get a service across there, you have to bore. TxDOT will require you a bore.
Yeah, but
of Main Street.
Kubota's tapped into it.
Kubota's tapped into Vine Street.
So we don't have any right-of-way to go over and just attach to that?
Not to Kubota's service line, no.
Is that not legal for 2 people to? That's not. We couldn't bill them then for it.
Well, the property there, that's Kubota's property. I mean, they don't have an easement. These people wouldn't have an easement from Kubota to tie on, neither to go across their property nor to tie on to their service line.
Well, Kubota doesn't own that property all the way to Vine, do they? I could have swore they didn't.
The question, Lynn, really is, could they have, if Kubota would have agreed to, could they have attached to tap their line?
That depends on what size Kubota's service is. If it's a 4-inch service, then no, we wouldn't allow to, typically wouldn't allow to, especially not a commercial and a residential on a 4-inch service line. If it was a 6-inch or a larger service line, that's a possibility.
Okay.
I do not know if this individual tried to negotiate anything with Kubota, or I do know they tried with the other property immediately in front of them between their home and Main Street and were unsuccessful at doing that.
Okay. Well, I support this. I'm just asking. It just seems like it might almost be cheaper to increase that line to 6-inch and they pay for it if we were to then approve it, cheaper than a septic. But that's their business. That's for them to decide. So, okay.
My question is, if these people wanted to ever sell their property, would their septic tank be acceptable? Because I think sometimes when you have a change to your property, I don't know, will they still be able to use that septic tank and sell the property, or were they going to be having to go and tap to our water line or sewer line?
I assume that they will be able to still continue to do that. The variance would be to the property, and the septic systems are regulated by the county. So the city doesn't typically, doesn't regulate those. But I assume that would transfer with the.
It would transfer, he wouldn't have to,
Now,
the new
I
owner
think-
wouldn't have to come back to us and ask for another variance?
Now, if they do some other development of that site, then we would have requirements for that. But as
Okay.
long as it remains a residence, I think
It's got to be aerobic system,
it does.
and it's over an acre, so it's okay.
Okay. That, my question. Any other comments? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. 7?
D7 is a resolution accepting an application for designation of a reinvestment zone and tax abatement agreement from Stimson and Sons Incorporated, doing business as Ashley Home Store, Victoria, and BPEC Enterprises LLC, doing business as Ashley Home Store, Corpus Christi, Texas, setting a public hearing for consideration of such application and declaring an effective date.
Make a motion, we approve item E7.
Second?
Thank you. Dale, I would have made you wait that long. I didn't, it's a heavy agenda. I could have moved it up. You could have gone home and.
It's been an interesting evening, that's all right.
Okay. Any comments or questions for Mr. Fowler or staff?
The financials are a little dated. Can we get more current ones, Dale?
We can certainly ask them. This is obviously what they presented to us, and we can see if we can update that. This is just accepting the application, so when we come back
we'll
in
do
the
that
future,
later.
we'll try to have something more updated.
This is only accepting the application.
Right.
Okay. Any further questions or anything? Okay. Very good. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, city manager reports.
We have a vacancy on the Library Advisory Board, and there's an application, but I will let Ms. Swoboda talk about it.
There is a vacancy on the Library Advisory Board. Allison Marek is now our Assistant City Attorney, and so she has resigned from that board. We have an application from Rosa Musquez, and so I'd like to know if you'd like for me to bring forth a resolution to appoint her to fill that vacancy.
I think that would be fine. I didn't realize I knew her till this afternoon. I was-
Yeah, Rosa used to work for the city, yes, in the IT.
Right. Okay. I think that'd be fine. Council, y'all agree with that?
Yes.
So we'll
Yes.
see that. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I have the next item, which is the City County Health Department Board appointments. We're back to that. So there's one vacancy due to David Way. Due to absences, he's no longer on the board. We need to fill his vacancy. It needs to be filled with a physician because of the composition of the board. Even though David Way was filling a citizen slot, because of the terms of the agreement with the county, it needs to be a physician. We also will have 2 other physicians' terms up in April. Dr. McNeil, who is eligible to serve another term. Dr. Kruger is not eligible to serve another term. So this council will need to appoint 3 physicians.
So Mr. Gibson, who's in here,
Yes.
is not eligible.
No, sir.
So he's just
He's
looking for a citizen's
citizen.
appointment.
Yes, sir.
If I may, I've spoken with numerous physicians, and besides Dr. McNeil, if he'd be so willing to take his second term, Dr. Daniel Cano and Dr. Taiwan Tillman would be interested in serving.
I have spoken to Dr. McNeil several times. He is more than willing to continue his service.
That's 3.
So is Dr. Tillman and Dr. Cano?
Yes.
Great.
So that's a consensus. We'll come back with a resolution. Doctor, do you have a preference on who serves David Way's position? Because that will be an unexpired term until June 2017.
I do not. But,
Okay.
Dr. Cano would be great.
Okay, so.
Which one is least sure? Because of the shortest term.
We can always reappoint.
Yeah, we need to hook them in better.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so
The next one is Chief Craig, and I saw him moving from the back to the forward. He's got 2 reports, the partial exemption racial profiling and then the crime report. And you have a crime report that was given to you tonight by him.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. Before you is, the first thing I'm going to talk about is the racial profile and partial exemption report. This is 2015 partial exemption racial profiling report that is submitted to the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement. The report is required by law to be presented to the governing body of each law enforcement agency on or before March 1st of each year. The report is a compilation of data gathered as a result of motor vehicle traffic stops made by officers of the Victoria Police Department. For these purposes, a motor vehicle stop means an occasion in which a peace officer stops a motor vehicle for an alleged violation of the law or ordinance. Officers capture the required information when those stops result in a citation, arrest, or both. The state of Texas revised the reporting requirements in the 81st legislative session, and attached data compiles with those reporting requirements. And looking at the actual form itself that you should have a copy of, you'll see that it outlines the total number of motor vehicle stops resulting in a citation of arrest, and then it has a breakdown of race or ethnicity, and then it also covers whether or not that race was known prior to the stop, whether a search was conducted, and whether that search was consensual. This is a partial exemption report, but I stand ready to answer any questions should you have some.
Chief, explain partial exemption, why it's.
Yes. State of Texas requires law enforcement to have one of three reporting techniques. One is a exempt report, and what that means is you as a law enforcement agency, you don't conduct any traffic stops. Some city colleges, police departments, they don't affect traffic stops, so they don't need to compile that data. A partial exemption says that you do conduct traffic stops as part of your routine law enforcement duties, and you have your vehicles equipped with video and audio to capture that data. And by virtue of the fact that you have that, you're afforded the opportunity to file a partial exemption. The third is a full report, and this report is for those agencies that do conduct traffic stops, but as a part of their traffic stops, they do not have audio or video capabilities, so they have to go through a much more comprehensive, when I say comprehensive, there's probably about 4 or 5 more questions that they have to answer and compile the data on and submit it to the state.
I have an odd question. How do we determine race/ethnicity in our society with so much multiculturalism?
That's a good question, and the best way to answer it is what we do is there's 3 ways in which we try to verify, but ultimately in the end it's going to be the officers, the information that they're seeing or getting. But the first way is through observation. Second way is that everybody we stop, they do have, if they have a driver's license, that driver's license return will come back with a race listed. And so officers often rely on that. And then the third is they can ask. So the vast majority of cases come from observation and those driver's license history returns.
Just picking one over the other when one parent is one and one is the other,
And sometimes it is difficult.
Favorites? I hate to say that.
Well, I was curious whether they were how they were making this decision, whether, and Hispanic is so encompassing, first of all.
Yes.
We know that the majority of this community is Mexican American. We may have a few Cubans and a few Puerto Ricans and others, but I'd like to see a further breakdown of that. Hispanic doesn't tell me nothing.
Do we capture a further breakdown on that? Or this is the state's form?
This is the state's form and what they require law enforcement agencies to actually report. I will say that beginning this year, because we got the ticket writers and those are being implemented, and because the reporting, the way that we actually collect the data is going to change, and so we will have greater information on all of that. It'll be far more comprehensive between the information that we get from the ticket writers and Brazos when we do our racial profiling report and from our RMS system. So we actually will have, when we do 2016, we'll have we will probably report it this way, but we will have additional data.
Right. Well, I've often been, well, not often, but occasionally been accused of being a Middle Easterner, but again, I don't know what that means. I'm also perplexed about consistently the race and ethnicity question, and why that observation is not known prior to the stop. Based on what? The police car typically follows a car, or is it because of the tinted windows, or what are some, what is compelling officers not to know? Because in some cases, it's pretty obvious. When you're driving on the street, you know who's in that car.
I think the key word there is know. And officers are trained that if they don't know for sure, they're not going to say they know. And I will tell you that having been out there for many, many years, I would support the fact that I did not know the vast majority of the time, that I would stop, especially in the evening hours where you can't see anything but silhouettes. So I also did a random audit of other agencies. I can tell you that our numbers are very consistent with what other agencies say when it comes to that specific question concerning whether or not they know for sure.
Well, the other question would beg me to ask, are we making more stops in a predominantly Hispanic part of the community as opposed to another part of the community that would skew the Hispanic count to always be consistently higher than any of the other races or ethnicities? Not knowing, Chief?
I would say anecdotally, I would say no, but empirically, I don't have the data to
Every stop has an address associated with it, does it not?
We don't stop them at their house.
So it just doesn't matter. I mean, what part of town are you making the stops?
You don't track the zone?
Yes, we do. Yeah, we don't report it here, but we do track the zone in the Scantrons that we do. Now, again, that data will be more comprehensive when we do next year's report, because we can provide you with an answer to those questions.
Is there a way that we can get a copy of the report that was attached to this, that got sent to the state?
That is the report that got attached.
Just like this one sheet? Doesn't tell me nothing.
There's 6,734 Scantron sheets. If you
Yes, that's the raw data right now that we're going away from and going more to the automated part of the Brazos ticket writers. And within the RMS system, we'll be able to have a better handle on how we collect that data. But yeah, right now, that's how we do it.
How can you do a search without a consent? How does that happen?
You develop other probable cause. Maybe the dog hits. Maybe you collect some other information that you can derive that allows you to do that.
You see something?
See?
You see, if they see something, that gives them the probable cause. Not to
That's what I meant by other probable cause. I should lay that out a little bit.
seeing it.
Well, the only thing I can also say is that as you seem to have less arrests with more officers on the street and more this year, this 15 being, well, about an average, a little bit less stops. But in prior years, there were a lot more arrests being conducted, so I don't know what that's attributed to.
I think I can attribute to a few factors. We do have a lot of young officers that require a lot of training, so they're not out there independent on their own developing that, so.
Less officers, they could have been more directed heading to certain places for the purpose of arrest. And now we have more just patrolling, which could lead to more stops.
A lot of variables that come into play.
It's hard to paint a very broad brush on what patrol officers do every moment.
I had asked for the other 3 years of data. I think that was emailed out. And then I put it in a spreadsheet to just look, because I need to see a pattern. And I see nothing that causes concern for me. It's interesting that we have to track data that we're not supposed to be paying attention to. We treat everyone the same. And I have full faith that your department does that the best that they can. I don't see any reason to see any problem. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Y'all want to move to, you got the next item too?
crime report. He's got that. And, yeah, everybody should have got a copy.
Jumping to the crime report. I left this, everybody should have a copy, I believe. So really, probably the easiest way to do this is to go by page, and I'll highlight what I think is the relevant data that I want to make sure that you're aware of. But certainly, I'm open to any questions you might have. When I look at 2015, and I'm going to make some statements, I think it was a relatively flat year in terms of crime, and we'll kind of get into that, why I think that. But also, you take a look at, those key components, key benchmarks that you evaluate the police department on, and one of the things that jumps up at me on the first page is we did answer 95,112 calls for service, and that's pretty much almost exactly the same thing as it was the year prior. So those two numbers stay consistent. Another key benchmark is emergency response to priority one calls. That when somebody picks up a 911 and it's emergency and it's a priority one, we're still responding to those under 6 minutes, and that's a very good benchmark. If you compare that to other agencies anywhere, a lot of agencies have a lot higher, and so I'm very pleased to report that ours is where it was. Now, overall, Class 1 crimes, and Class 1 crimes are your more serious type of crimes when it comes to violence. Murder, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, but it also includes some property crimes, that being burglary, theft, and motor vehicle theft. When you look at those crimes, they increased by 0.08%. To put that into more perspective, that was 2 more incidents in 2015 than in 2014. Our Class 2 crimes decreased by 7.57%. In looking at you'll see the graphs on page 2. It gives you a visual representation of the total Class 1 crimes since 2008. And like I said, this year, for the first time in 5 years, we did show a slight, very, very slight increase of 0.08%. We did see an uptick in total violent crimes, not by a whole lot, but enough to push it up to 309 this year. And again, that also kind of follows a nationwide trend. A lot of agencies are seeing a little bit more of an increase in violent crime. Ours is a little bit of an increase. And then total property crimes, we went from 2344 in 2014 to 2323 in 2015. I'll take any type of decrease I can get, so I was pleased to see that was lower. That always is a challenge for us when it comes to some of the property crimes that we have. Moving on to page 3, again, just the first chart is just a historical data of Class 1 crimes by year, and then they takes a look at the crime rate by 100,000 residents, so it's your Class 1 crime rate. And then in the bottom of the page, it talks about Class 2 crimes. Class 2 crimes can be felony, they can be misdemeanor, but at the same time, they're just not anything that's listed in the Class 1 criteria. And we saw some decreases in some of those and a couple little, couple increases in a couple areas, but not by a whole lot. We're talking, they may be a larger percentage, however, they weren't large in number. Class 1, Class 2, and crime rate changes from prior year, that's the top of page 4. You'll see that gives you a historical breakdown. And then the next graph is Class 1 and Class 2 crimes. And that followed by, at the bottom of the page, we chart out arrests. And as you can see, arrests are down. We just had that conversation. It's probably attributed to a number of factors. And then a graph that demonstrates that. And that is the end of the highlights of what I wanted to make sure I brought to your attention. Is there any questions you have concerning the report itself?
I don't know if this is germane to the actual crime report, but what's the overall closure rate for open cases, like it goes through the detectives?
And I don't have that with me right now. I could get that. That's a measurement that we've kind of tweaked a little bit to stay up with, the current trends. But I'm more than happy to come back at some other point in time and talk about clearance rates. That is, in and of itself, a very interesting, long conversation.
Well, no, because sometimes when I report things to y'all, I'm doing it for reporting for this.
Correct.
Knowing full well that it's not going to get closed.
Correct. There are cases, depending on, the presence of effective leads.
Right.
And we have a criteria by which we look at. And unfortunately, there are just some cases that, there's just not enough information to go off of.
Do you want to follow up to that?
I'll just get with Chief.
But you close those,
We close them.
close cases.
Not solved.
Right, not
and
solved, but I
Unless, yes, unless some evidence comes back up to reopen it, so.
But, I mean, I feel kind of silly sometimes reporting them because I know that I don't have enough evidence, to get it solved.
Well, but it may be
Well, I
part
wanted
of
it
a
in this
bigger,
report.
bigger
Yeah.
issue.
I wouldn't do that. I would fully encourage you to continue.
I know, and you always have encouraged me to do that, and that's why I do, but it's for
Because
these numbers and looking for patterns for y'all.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. We need to know because oftentimes we can put pieces together based on patterns and based on crime analysis. And we just had a recent case where we had a very alert citizen that saw somebody going back into his neighbor's yard. And, he decided he was going to go ahead and just give us a call. And he was apologetic for that. And yet, we caught those individuals. They were burglarizing the house, and we cleared several other cases. That's why we need to know that information, so.
I just have a quick question, and it's got nothing to do with the report. I just wanted to see, you started the report with 2008. May I ask you when you came to see what the pattern is since you got here?
Came in August of 2011.
Yeah,
really?
I didn't have all of 11, but 12, 13, and 14, and 15 were mine.
Okay, well, that's good. Just wanted to see the trend. Keep it up.
And Mayor, may I interject something? On the profiling issue, I don't want to be negative. What I want to suggest, I think we're almost to full force, Chief.
Yes.
And I'm encouraged by that. And certainly I'm not, I'd like to see more tickets, especially the speeders in this town. The more speeding tickets, I think, will help maybe start curtailing some of these horrific car accidents that we see at intersections. I attribute it mostly all to speeding, maybe the cell phones too, Mayor, but I just see so much speeding. And I hope that our officers are encouraged to bring that down by making those stops and so forth.
They are encouraged, but we are actually looking at several other strategies to further emphasize that, plus a couple of things to mention, distraction driving and failure to yield. Those tend to be our greatest violations that's causing the greatest amount of accidents.
Thank you, Chief. One more item?
The last item, we're going to end on a very positive note.
wasn't
Not that
positive?
yours wasn't positive. No, it was very positive. A very, very positive note.
Chief Drake put you up for that?
No, he didn't. But, sometimes we just don't always end on positive notes, so. Lynn will explain, but you may remember we applied for a Water Board Development Grant through the Groundwater Conservation District, and Lynn's got news on that grant, so.
Yes, good evening. If you recall, in November, we partnered with the Victoria County Groundwater Conservation District, applied to the Texas Water Development Board for a grant, a 50-50 match grant in the amount of $570,225 to develop a full-scale aquifer storage and recovery demonstration project here in Victoria. The scope of that, of course, involved retrofitting one of our water wells in Riverside Park, well number 19, to an ASR well, extending a 12-inch water line, treated water line, from the intersection of Bluff and Red River west along Red River and tying into that well, and then conducting months of cycle testing where we would inject treated water into the aquifer, take a lot of level measurements, water quality measurements, and then extract that water and do the same thing over the entire project we anticipate will span 2 years. I'm very happy to report to you that we received word that we were successful. We did. We were awarded the grant in its full amount, in its entirety. So you will not have to formally adopt or accept the grant because when the legislature appropriated the money for that grant, they mandated that the applicants and recipients be groundwater districts. However, so the groundwater district will have to formally accept the grant. But there will be a number of action items that will come before you for your consideration, some in the very near future. We will bring very soon, within the next few months, bring before you 2 readings of a budget amendment because even though 50% of the grant is paid for by the state, it is that amount is a reimbursable amount, and so we will have to upfront the money. And so we will bring a budget amendment to you for that. We will bring before you an interlocal agreement with the Groundwater Conservation District that will set forth the terms that we will use to manage the grant, how pay requests will be performed by both parties, just all the terms of working through this grant process. And then we'll bring before you 2 professional services agreements with 2 different engineering firms for their work, their part of this project. Then, once we get through with the bidding, permitting and bidding, design and bidding phases, there'll be a construction contract with a water well contractor be brought before you for award. There will be a resolution to purchase pipe and fittings that we will use to install that water line with our own forces. And then depending on the amount of the predicted laboratory expenses, there might be another professional services contract or a services contract with a third-party lab to conduct some of that testing. So there'll be a number of action items coming before you. With that, I'll address any questions you might have.
Was this the grant that they were only going to have like 11 or 13 possible recipients?
Actually, fewer than that. There was only $1 million appropriated statewide. I believe there were 6 applicants, and I think there were 3 projects funded, although ours was by far the largest. Ours was the full-scale project. Some of the others were that were awarded, I know, were just like core and wireline collecting data from the aquifer itself.
So the Water Development Board is very interested to see how this turns
Absolutely.
out.
Absolutely.
And to apply it elsewhere. Well, all I can say is with respect to economic development, not everybody fully realizes how the cost of water affects this community. I do because of, well, it's imperative. So congratulations. Mr. Halpern.
I had a couple of questions, and one is we're retrofitting an existing well. Are we going to, we don't have any monitoring wells around it to prove out, and this is supposed to be a test project. However, we can, of course, monitor the composition of the water coming back out. That would tell us some.
We do have a monitoring well. We have well 21, which is, I forget exactly, maybe 1,500 feet away. It's not what you would, typically you'd like to see closer monitoring wells.
Yes.
But the scope of the grant didn't allow for drilling additional monitoring wells. So we will use well 21 as a monitoring well to the extent that we can. And then, of course, we will monitor both level and water quality in well 19 itself. I have been in discussion with the Groundwater District, and they are discussing the possibility of maybe them funding a monitoring well closer to well 19. But there's a lot of logistics that have to be done.
And the idea being, of course, to prove out the science, and
Certainly.
the science says, yes, this is feasible and this will work, and then this is, of course, a test project to prove it. And if we don't have enough monitoring, it may not give us a clear view. That was my concern.
Sure.
What's the end date, you think?
The end date,
We're going to have results, and we're going to be kind of at the end of this project.
we'll see. If this is February, if we start in May of 16, we're probably looking at May of 18 before we're completely done.
2 years?
Good question. Y'all want to just keep going? It's only been almost 3 hours.
And don't forget, yes.
I'm not.
You need a motion to adjourn?
No. I just want to remind y'all that Citizens Academy is here, and I'm so glad Not all our meetings are this long, but they are having food upstairs. I don't know that there's food for us.
There is, there is.
So we can go up and visit with them. So our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.